Chapter 950. Early in the morning, it had just rained on the ground of Mount Longhu. As the saying goes, the spring rain was moist and crisp. Mount Longhu looked green and lush everywhere. A series of major events had happened on Mount Longhu one after another. First, the major cultivation sects of Japan had joined hands to climb the mountain. Then, the Xintian sect had knocked on the door and forced them to abdicate. Then Wang Yuanshan had died in Shuya and the absolute love-extinguishing formation was destroyed. And finally, the incident of Ziyuan's apostasy, in which the sun and moon elixir had been stolen. If any one of these incidents were to occur in any other sect, then it would probably be capable of causing the sect to collapse and shatter into pieces, and it was even to the extent that the sect would be in danger of being annihilated. However, as the sect with the longest history in the Chinese cultivation world, the Jingyi school's incense had never been cut off. It had a deep foundation and long tenacity. It was really incomparable to other sections. After several huge upheavals and twists and turns, the ancient giant of the Jingyi school still appeared calm and composed as usual. The Taoist priests on the mountain got up early. They did their homework, recited scriptures, and patrolled the mountain. They were all busy with their own work. It was a busy scene in an orderly manner, and there were no signs of setbacks or fluctuations at all. At the entrance of the main peak of Mount Longhu, a young Taoist priest was sweeping the floor with a broom in his hand. He looked around with a sigh. Mount Longhu was filled with spiritual energy. It was one of the best grotto heavens in the world. Although he had to sweep the floor early in the morning, the fresh air he breathed in made him feel comfortable and happy. The little Taoist took a deep breath and stretched. Just as he was about to rest for a while, the Shirdi beside him scolded him, "Dao Jing, don't be lazy. Be careful or I'll tell your master." The little Taoist named Dao Jing was shocked and said with a bitter face, "Shirdi Daoming, you don't have to be so diligent in tattling, do you? If you want a tattletale, why don't you tattletale shimmy?" The Taoist priest who was sweeping the floor with this little Taoist was the Taoist priest who had patrolled the mountain with Zhang Lufang. Although he had spoken fiercely and threatened Zhang Lufang that he would report her for leaving her post and disappearing from the world, how could he really report her? Not only was Zhang Lufang beautiful, but she also had a good personality. Although her mouth was a little fast, she was usually sweet and said nice things to everyone she met. Who on Mount Longhu didn't like her? The fact that Zhang Lufang had left her post without permission could be a big or small matter, but the key was that she was a criminal to begin with, and it just so happened that a series of major events happened on Mount Longhu. Her senior brother was also afraid that if he really reported her, he wouldn't be able to clean up the mess. If that happened, Zhang Lufang would end up like that big-nosed Li Sen and be expelled from the sect. That would be terrible. Therefore this Taoist priest named Dao Ming was all talk and no action. He went back to complain to the brothers around him and did not continue. Early in the morning, he pinched his nose and came to help Zhang Lufang with the chores that were supposed to be done by her. There were hundreds of Taoist priests on Mount Longhu. These days, every second was an inch of gold, so everyone was immersed in cultivation. Therefore, no one noticed which Taoist priest had disappeared. In addition, everyone deliberately concealed this matter for Zhang Lufang. This kind of thing could not be concealed, so these Taoist priests knew that Zhang Lufang had disappeared. Only Zhang Ling and the other cultivators of the older generation did not know about this matter. But no matter what, the truth couldn't be contained. It would have been better if Dao Jing hadn't mentioned it. Once he mentioned it, Dao Ming's face was full of sorrow. He was full of anger and said, "Don't mention this B***-starred girl. She is really wild. She slipped away without saying a word and let me do the rest for her. She comes back, I will." Before he could finish his words, Dao Jing suddenly pointed down the mountain and said in surprise, "Senior brother, look. It's Junior sister. Junior sister is back." Dao Ming was stunned and looked in the direction of his finger. Sure enough, he saw a pretty and delightful little Taoist nun running along the mountain road. The two of them looked from afar and saw that Zhang Liufang's expression was strange. She was in a hurry as if she was being chased by thousands of pursuers. Dao Ming's face was filled with joy, but then he immediately put on a serious face and shouted, "Junior sister, do you still remember to come back?" Zhang Lufang saw him at a glance and quickly said, "Senior brother Dao Ming, hurry up, go and call eldest uncle and my master out. Something's wrong, something big has happened." Dao Ming scolded, "Calm down. What do you look like now? What's going on?" When the Japanese cultivation world joined hands to go up the mountain, our Jingyi school did not panic. Now that the mystical silver fox has been destroyed, what's there to be so flustered about? Zhang Lufang had already rushed up to him and said loudly, "Oh, look for yourself." As she said this, she pointed to the foot of the mountain behind her. Dao Ming and Dao Jing took a look and saw a row of buses winding along the road at the foot of the mountain, like a long dragon. After these buses stopped at the foot of Mount Longhu, many people got off. Most of them were young people in different clothes like college students. They looked around excitedly and craned their necks. Some of these people shouted loudly as if they were calling their friends, while others took pictures excitedly with their mobile phones or cameras. Dao Ming and Dao Jing looked at each other. Although Mount Longhu was a tourist attraction, they had never seen such a large group of tourists come here. It seemed that there were dozens of buses at the foot of the mountain. There might be more than 2,000 people getting off these buses. Dao Ming glared at Zhang Lufang strangely and said, "Are you crazy? It's a good thing that so many tourists have come to Mount Longhu." Zhang Lufang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She stamped her feet and said, "Look carefully at the person standing at the front." The two Taoist priests took a closer look and saw that the person in the lead had an imposing appearance. Although they were far away, they could feel an extraordinary temperament coming towards them. They were all cultivators and had excellent eyesight. At a glance, they recognized that this person was none other than Li Yundong. Dao Ming and Dao Jing were stunned. Dao Jing was tongue-tied and said, Li Wudi? Why is he here? Isn't he dead? Dao Ming stammered, Li, what is Li Wudi doing here? He brought so many people here. Does he want to visit the mountain or challenge the dojo? Seeing that the two of them were even worse off than her, Zhang Lufang said anxiously, "Stop talking. Hurry up and tell Shibuan master." Li Yundong's reputation was really frightening. He could already be called the #1 person in the cultivation world today. It was already a big deal for him to visit alone, but now he had so many people behind him. It was really frightening. Dao Ming, who had been calm and scolding Zhang Lufang, could no longer hold on. He turned around and ran up the mountain. His footsteps were in a hurry and he almost fell several times. Fortunately, he used both his hands and feet to prevent himself from falling to the ground in a mess. He ran all the way to the gate of the Taoist master's mansion and shouted, "Oh no, oh no!" Zhang Lufang, who was following behind him, also shouted, someone come, something's wrong." As soon as the two of them shouted, even the Taoist priests who were cultivating stopped. After a while, the door of the backyard opened and many Taoist priests came out. Zhang Ling came out with a livid face. Before she got close, she scolded from a distance. B****, why are you crying and howling so early in the morning? Zhang Lufang, where have you been these days? And Dao Ming, look at you. What do you look like? You look so flustered and embarrassed. What do you look like? Dao Ming didn't have time to be embarrassed. He pointed behind him and stammered, great, master, uncle, down the mountain. He was so nervous and frightened that he stuttered. Zhang Ling was also famous for her impatience. She said angrily, "What's down the mountain? Have you seen a ghost? Why are you so scared?" At this time there were no tourists on Mount Longhu. The Taoist priests of Mount Longhu were all around. They all burst into laughter. Seeing this, Zhang Lufang hurriedly said, "Auntie, Li Yundong is here." The laughter suddenly stopped. All the people who had been laughing were like roosters that had been strangled by their necks, and all their laughter was strangled. Zhang Ling's pupils instantly shrank. She said in surprise, "Li Yundong? He isn't he?" Everyone was also frightened and whispered to each other, "No way. Isn't Li Yundong dead?" "Yes, how did he come back to life?" "I know. It must be the sun and moon flowing elixir that Ziyuan stole that saved Li Yundong." Zhang Ling quickly came to her senses. Even if she were a fool, she could guess what Li Yundong was going to do this time. Zhang Ling sneered and shouted angrily, Well, does Li Yundong want to take people away? A country has its laws, a family has its rules, and a sect has its dogma. Disciples of the Jingyi school, can you tolerate an outsider coming to our Mount Longhu and acting recklessly?" Although Li Yundong was powerful and famous, the disciples of the Jingyi school were also proud and arrogant. Zhang Ling's words immediately stirred up their arrogance and blood. They shouted in unison, "No." Zhang Ling waved her hand and led the disciples of the Jingyi school down the mountain in a mighty manner. Zhang Ling raised her eyebrows and thought to herself, "I don't believe that you, Li Yundong, would dare to go against the world and behave atrociously here." She led the disciples of the Jingyi school down the mountain. As soon as she arrived at the gate of the mountain, she saw a group of people rushing up. Zhang Ling took a closer look and saw that, in addition to Li Yundong, Su Chan, Zhou Qin, Lin Miao, and Ruan Hongling, these people were all students and teachers carrying big and small bags. There were also many people wearing red hats standing in the crowd, holding a red flag in their hands that was fluttering in the wind. On it were a few golden words, Tianan City Donghua Travel Agency 4-day tour to Mount Longhu? The aggressive disciples of the Jingyi school were dumbfounded. They stared dumbfoundedly at the group of Tianan University students rushing up the mountain in front of them. Their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Damn, what the hell is going on? What are so many students doing? Li Yundong, what are you doing? Zhang Ling was tongue-tied and was about to speak when some students saw so many Taoist priests standing at the gate of the mountain. They all became excited and said, "Wow, look, it's Taoist priests." It's true. He's a genuine Taoist priest. Are they from the Wu-Tang sect? Idiots, the Wu-Tang sect is on Wu-Tang Mountain. This is Mount Longhu, so it must be the Longhu sect. The sect in Mount Longhu is called the Longhu sect? Then is the cartoon in Mount Longhu called asterisk asterisk asterisk? The students chattered non-stop, and the noise made Mount Longhu look like a pot of boiling water. Some of the more courageous students even rushed to the side of Zhang Ling and the other Taoist priests. Regardless of whether they agreed or not, they just minded their own business and took photos together. Zhang Lufang was the most beautiful, which caused many people to exclaim. Many boys rushed to her and rushed to take photos with her. Even Zhou Ping and the others were not spared. Zhang Lufang wanted to cry but had no tears. She finally squeezed out of the crowd and said to Zhang Ling pitifully, "Eldest aunt, what should we do now?" Zhang Ling's arms were wrapped around by two girls, and she looked like a prop. She wanted to explode, but she didn't know how to do it. In order to be polite to these ordinary students, she still had a stiff smile on her face. It was so dry that it looked like a layer of mud had been smeared over it. Although Zhang Ling had the ability to adapt quickly and was in charge of many affairs of the Jingyi school, this was the first time she had encountered such a thing in her life. This group of students had obviously been encouraged by Li Yundong to come here in the name of tourism. As a tourist attraction, Mount Longhu obviously couldn't be refused. She couldn't beat them, talk to them, or scold them. Otherwise, with so many people spreading the news, the notoriety of the Jingyi school in Mount Longhu would immediately spread throughout the internet. At that time she would suffer even more losses. Zhang Ling felt a headache coming on. The corners of her eyes kept twitching, and she gritted her teeth in her heart and said, "Li Yundong, good. You actually played such a trick. Okay, I'll play with you." Chapter 951. The main peak of Mount Longhu was in a mess. The Taoist priests of the Jingyi school were ready to fight, but they didn't expect to encounter such a thing. Mount Longhu was also a famous tourist attraction in the country. Since it was an open attraction, those who came were naturally guests, and there was no reason to close the door to refuse guests. Li Yundong came to the foot of Mount Longhu with a large group of students, with a posture of "I'm here for sightseeing. What can you do to me?" It really made these Taoist priests, young and old, stunned and not knowing whether to laugh or cry. It was as if two sides had agreed to play football. One side was cheated and was ready to play football, but the other side gave the first side a good beating. When the first side was ready to take revenge in the second set, the other side said with a straight face, "Sorry, I'm here to play football." Damn it. You can't be so shameless. You, Super Li, are really good at fighting. Whether you can win or not is another matter, but you can't deprive us of the right to fight, can you? You can't ignore our burning hearts, can you? Most importantly, this guy actually used innocent and clueless commoners as his meat shield to pave the way. His level of shamelessness was practically unparalleled in all the historical records in the world, from ancient times to modern times, Chinese to foreign countries. Li Yundong naturally knew that no matter how bold the disciples of the Jingyi school were, they wouldn't dare to do anything to these ordinary students. He walked up to Zhang Ling and the others with a smile. He didn't bow and greet them but just said with a smile, "Jinren Zhang, we meet again." Li Yundong walked up to Zhang Ling, and the students who had surrounded the Taoist priests to take pictures retreated with laughter, enjoying their proud work just now. As soon as Zhang Ling got out of trouble, she took a deep breath. She felt as if she had walked around hell. Her head was swollen and her eyes were full of anger. She gritted her teeth and said, "Li Yundong, what do you want to do?" Li Yundong laughed gently, but the corners of his eyes were full of slyness and pride. He said with a smile, "Do you still need to say? Of course, I'm bringing my classmates and teachers to Mount Longhu of the Jingyi school. Daoist Zhang, there are more than 2,000 people here. Up until now, Mount Longhu has never received such a large-scale tour group, right?" Zhang Ling almost blurted out an expletive, but when she saw all the curious eyes staring at her, she forcefully swallowed it back down. It was a good thing that she didn't blurt it out. Zhang Ling suppressed her anger and sneered, "Our Mount Longhu of Jingyi school has been glorious for a while. What are these people to us? Li Yundong chuckled. Really? That's good. I was afraid that if too many people came at once, you wouldn't be able to handle it. As he spoke, Li Yundong looked around. He saw that most of the Taoist priests of Mount Longhu were looking at him covetously, and only a few people were looking at him curiously and timidly. Li Yundong smiled and said to them, "Don't look at me like that. I'm here to promote your Jingyi school. If you receive me well this time, maybe there will be a lot of incense offerings." Li Yundong's words made many Taoist priests' hearts skip a beat. Although most of them were cultivators who paid attention to purity and had no special pursuit of material life, cultivation was, after all, the most expensive thing in the world. Money was needed everywhere in the Jingyi school. If such a large group of tourists really came to visit, they would be more than happy to welcome them. But the problem was, Li Yundong had brought such a large group of people. Was he really here to burn incense and visit, not to destroy the temple? No matter how Zhang Ling looked at Li Yundong, there was a deep evil in her eyes. She sneered and said, "More incense offerings? Thanks to you, you just need to play less tricks and everything will be fine. Don't think I don't know what you want to do? You want to save Ziyuan, don't you?" Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, but his face remained calm. He smiled and lowered his voice a little, saying, "Jinren Zhang is really smart. You understood my intention at once. Jinren Zhang, why don't you let Ziyuan go and I'll take these students back? What do you think?" Zhang Ling laughed angrily and also lowered her voice, saying, "Li Yundong, I know that you are invincible in fighting and no one in the world is your opponent, but don't be presumptuous. Figure out where you are standing. This is Mount Longhu, the Jingyi school. Since the beginning of the Han dynasty, countless masters have challenged our Jingyi school in the past 2,000 years. Countless sects have wanted to defeat us in Mount Longhu, but history has proved countless times that our Jingyi school has defeated strong enemies again and again, and Mount Longhu has stood firm again and again. I don't believe that you will be an exception." Li Yundong was not angry at Zhang Ling's tough reply. He just smiled and said, "Hey Jinren Zhang, don't be angry. Don't be angry. All the cultivators in the world are one family. Why do you have to get angry and provoke two tigers to fight? I came here with sincerity this time. I want to discuss it with you. If you don't agree, we can talk about it slowly." Zhang Ling sneered and said, "This matter is the internal affairs of our Jingyi school. You are an outsider. What is there to talk about? Moreover, Ziyuan stole the sun and moon flowing elixir, which is an act of apostasy. It is absolutely intolerable, and there is absolutely nothing to talk about." Li Yundong seemed to have expected her to say this. He nodded, sighed and said, "I siege." He turned his head and made a gesture to Zhou Qin. Zhou Qin nodded and said a few words to the students around her. The students immediately turned around and said loudly, "Everyone follow me. Let's go up the mountain together. Don't mess around, don't make any noise. We'll line up to buy tickets later." These students had been waiting impatiently for a long time. At this time they couldn't help but cheer and step forward one after another. The dark torrent began to slowly squirm. There were many disciples of the Jingyi school gathered together, but compared with these students they were really dwarfed. They watched these students pass by them with very strange expressions on their faces. Any one of them had the strength to annihilate these defenseless students, but how could they really make a move? Each of these students was like tofu that had fallen into the ashes. They couldn't be blown away or hit. Zhang Ling seemed to have vaguely understood what Li Yundong wanted to do. She glanced at the black mass of Tianan University students behind Li Yundong and sneered. "Just with them?" Li Yundong said with a smile, "Jinren Zhang, don't underestimate the enemy." Zhang Ling laughed and said, "Jinren Li, you are too naive. With so many people coming to our Mount Longhu, how much income will it bring us? Be careful that you kill 3,000 enemies and lose 10,000 of your own." Li Yundong also laughed and said, "Jinren Zhang, let's wait and see." The two of them looked at each other and laughed. Their laughter was hypocritical and fake. After Zhang Ling finished laughing, she turned around and flicked her sleeves. Her face immediately darkened. She sneered and said to Zhou Ping, who was always by her side, "Go, send someone to keep an eye on them. Don't let them mess around on the mountain." Zhou Ping said with a strange expression, "How? There are thousands of them." Zhang Ling said angrily, "Nonsense, can't we just keep an eye on the main attractions?" Zhou Ping said with a wry smile, "Master. Then we won't cultivate anymore?" Zhang Ling was stunned for a moment, then gritted her teeth and said, "Let's hold on for one day and see what happens." Zhou Ping had no choice but to turn back and give her fellow disciples a wink. Then she left with the students of Tianan University. At this time the students went up the mountain. Most of them were divided into more than a dozen square formations, led by more than a dozen tour guides, and walked toward Mount Longhu one after another. Zhang Ling looked at Li Yundong and the others covetously. If she found anything wrong, she would go forward. But after watching for a while, she saw that these students were all buying tickets and entering the door. She couldn't help but be surprised. Is Li Yundong really here to give us money? She thought. The tickets are more than 200 yuan each. Even if it's a group purchase from a travel agency, it'll cost nearly 200 yuan. There are more than 2,000 people here, that's hundreds of thousands of yuan. Is Li Yundong so rich? While she was wondering, she saw many students coming to the front gate of the Taoist master's mansion and pointing at a huge bronze tripod, as if asking what it was. The tour guide who followed them explained that it was a place to burn incense and worship the gods. After burning incense, one could make a wish, and it was very effective. When these students heard this, they were overjoyed and quickly asked for the price. When Zhang Ling heard this, she was also overjoyed. She kept winking at the Taoist priest nearby and thought to herself, Li Yundong, you came to me for me to kill. If I don't kill you, my surname is not Zhang. The Taoist priest next to her understood and also secretly hinted to the tour guide. It should be known that the world's tour guides were all unscrupulous. They all colluded with tourist attractions and other links to earn customers' money. When the tour guide saw the Taoist priest next to her winked, she immediately understood and showed 5 fingers. When these students saw this, they were shocked. What? 5,000? In a place like Mount Longhu, the ticket money was only a very small part of the income. A larger part of the income came from incense money. The amount of incense money could vary from 10 to dozens of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Especially for the first incense in some famous temples, there were countless people who wanted to snatch it even if they had to break their heads to do so. In some places that were deeply religious, there were even bloody fights over the first incense. In the world, the richer and more powerful people were, the more religious they were, and the more they believed in these things. Therefore, they often spent a lot of money, and it became one of the main sources of income for a religion or a sect. The tour guide originally only wanted to trick the students into buying a 50 yuan incense stick. She did not expect these students to be so arrogant, asking for 5,000 yuan. She was so scared that she quickly waved her hands, indicating that it was not that much. But she did not expect that the students would immediately gasp and say, 50,000? Isn't that too much? So expensive? Immediately, a student beside her picked up his phone angrily, wanting to take a picture. So expensive? Take a picture and post it on Weibo. Zhang Ling was shocked. Although she did not usually come into contact with these modern things on the internet, she knew the power of public opinion. Zhang Ling quickly stepped forward and said, No, you misunderstood. This incense can't be so expensive. This incense is. She was just about to say that this incense was only 5 yuan, but before she could finish her words, she saw the students patting their chests in relief and saying, 500 yuan? I was scared to death. I was wondering why it was so expensive. Some students immediately shouted, 500 yuan is barely acceptable. Why don't we burn 1 incense stick for each person? Zhang Ling felt a little like she was riding a roller coaster. She had just been shocked, but now she couldn't help but be a little happy. 1 incense stick for each person? There were more than 2,000 people, so how much would it be if 500 incense sticks were burned? She was making a fortune. How much was the annual income of Mount Longhu? He had earned so much in one day, and that didn't even include other money. Even though Zhang Ling was quite powerful in the Jingyi school and had a high cultivation quotient, her heart was still alive. She kept sneering and saying, Li Yundong, I think this time you are pretending to be a stone and smashing your own foot. You have fattened us this time. Just as she was thinking, she suddenly saw a student turn around and take out a pack of incense from his backpack, then seriously light it up and insert it into the incense burner. Zhang Ling was dumbfounded and stammered, Why did you bring your own? The student said with a smile, Thanks to Li Yundong for reminding us. He prepared a bag for each of us. As he spoke, the other students also took out a bag of incense from their backpacks and lit it one after another. Zhang Ling was dumbfounded. She would never have thought that there would be people who would bring their own wine to eat and women to brothels. However, she had never seen anyone who would bring their own incense from thousands of miles away to burn their own incense. Chapter 952. At this moment, Zhang Ling suddenly had an urge to go berserk. She stood there for a long time without moving. She didn't know how long it had been until Zhang Lufang came over and spoke to her timidly. Only then did Zhang Ling react. When Zhang Ling came to her senses and took a closer look, she suddenly gasped. Wow, this incense burner is already full of incense sticks. Not a single F*king stick was bought here. They were all brought with them. How wicked. If the great ancestors of the three pure ones knew about this, they would be so angry that they would go crazy. The corners of Zhang Ling's eyes kept twitching, and she cursed in her heart, Li Yundong, how wicked are you to come up with such a wicked idea? Zhang Lufang looked at Zhang Ling cautiously. After waiting for most of the students to leave, she asked in a low voice that she already knew the answer to, Great Aunt, whose idea was this? Was it Li Yundong? How could there be such a thing? It's too wicked. Zhang Liufang's little calculation could not be said to be not clever. Her words implied that she had completely removed herself from the blame and corrected her position. Auntie, I haven't been with Li Yundong these days. I have no idea what they are going to do. Even if I know they are watching me and I can't send a message. Even if I have a mobile phone to send a message, there is no power. Even if there is power, it's... Oh, anyway, this has nothing to do with me. I'm on your side. I was born a member of the Jingyi school. If I die, then forget it. I want to live well. In short, this has nothing to do with me. It's all Li Yundong's fault. Zhang Ling didn't expect Zhang Lufang to have so many plans in an instant. She flew into a rage and finally couldn't help roaring, this is more than wicked. It's simply wicked. Zhang Lufang looked at Zhang Ling with a sad and sympathetic face and thought to herself, alas, Auntie is so angry that she's incoherent. Zhang Ling threw a tantrum on the spot for a while. After her anger subsided a little, she took a deep breath and laughed angrily again. Li Yundong, do you think you can force our Jingyi school to submit like this? You're too naive. Earn less. At most, I won't earn your money. Let's see who can outlast the other. Zhang Lufang hurriedly nodded. Yes, as the saying goes, poverty cannot be shaken, might cannot be subdued, riches and honor. Zhang Ling was so angry that she interrupted her and said, Bullsh**t. Do you know how to talk? Is it appropriate to say that here? Zhang Lufang quickly covered her mouth with her hands and looked at Zhang Ling in horror. After a while, she put down her hands and said cautiously, in short, eldest aunt, this little bit of money is nothing to our Jingyi school, right? If Li Yundong wants to use this to force us to submit, it would be the most ridiculous thing in the world, wouldn't it? Zhang Ling snorted angrily, as long as you know. Let's go. I'd like to see what other tricks Li Yundong has up his sleeves. Zhang Lufang nodded vigorously and agreed, yes, let's see what tricks he can play. She followed Zhang Ling step by step. After taking a few steps, she couldn't help but look back. Looking at the dense incense sticks in the incense burner, she thought to herself, ah, so much money. While she was sighing in her heart, she suddenly heard Zhang Ling shout angrily, Zhang Lufang, what are you muttering about? Zhang Lufang was shocked and didn't dare to look back again. She obediently followed Zhang Ling. The two of them arrived at the side hall of the Taoist master's mansion. Zhang Ling sat down cross-legged on a futon. She looked around and saw that she had sent Zhou Ping away, leaving only Zhang Lufang by her side. She pointed to the side and said, sit down and meditate with peace of mind. Zhang Lufang responded and carefully sat down next to him. She was about to run her qi to meditate when she heard noises coming from outside. Wasn't that right? There were more than 2,000 people here, and they were all hot-blooded university students. Boys and girls of this age were the most restless. Usually they stayed in the ivory tower until lice grew all over their bodies. Now that they were out of the cage, they were like 2,000 monkeys on Mount Huagua. They wished that everyone could carry a gun and cause a revolution. As the saying goes, like general, like soldier. Although Li Yundong was not the nominal leader of this group of students, he was definitely their spiritual leader. He had come up with such an unprecedented bad idea, so naturally, these students couldn't be serious. They were all noisy, laughing and cursing, and their voices were so loud that Mount Longhu was about to jump up and down. The side hall where Zhang Ling was located was only one door away from these voices. How could Zhang Lufang be able to meditate when the noise was like waves? She only forced herself to calm down for a while, then couldn't help but listen attentively. She wanted to hear what the noise outside was about. Why were they so happy? Zhang Lufang had grown up on Mount Longhu, so she couldn't be more familiar with the flowers and grass here. She could even feel the way down the mountain with her eyes closed, so naturally there was nothing new about it. However, almost none of these college students had been to this place before, so they were curious about everything. When they saw a stone, they would shout and make a fuss. Zhang Lufang felt as if she had swallowed 25 little mice in one breath because of the noise outside. She was stretching her neck to listen to the movement outside when she suddenly heard Zhang Ling scolding, "Zhang Lufang, let him be strong. The cool breeze blows the hill. Let him be strong. The bright moon shines on the river." You should have read this poem by Jinren Sanfeng, right? Zhang Lufang was so scared that she shrank her neck and whispered, "Yes." Zhang Ling shouted, "Why are you still like this? How did you practice kung fu?" Zhang Lufang didn't dare to say anything else, so she closed her eyes again. However, no matter how hard she closed her eyes, she couldn't meditate. The noise outside was too noisy. There was nothing she could do. Cultivation was like this. The surrounding environment must be good, otherwise, it would be empty talk. Otherwise, for thousands of years, which great cultivator would cultivate in a busy city? Which great Jinren would meditate in a prosperous place? Otherwise, why would cultivators look for the Taoist rite, the ancestral court, and find remote, quiet, deep mountains and forests full of spirit treasures? The reason was very simple. They were afraid of being noisy. More than 2,000 students were making a ruckus. It was so noisy that Zhang Lufang felt dizzy. From morning to afternoon, the noise at the entrance never stopped. Waves of people came and went, and groups of people came and went. It was like a carpet bombing with no pause at all. It was not easy to endure until the sun went down, and these students gradually went down the mountain and left. Only then did the gate quiet down. Zhang Lufang had never been disturbed from morning to night in her life. After the students left, she still felt a buzzing in her ears as if there were still lingering sounds. She rubbed her temples painfully with both hands and complained in her heart. But when she glanced at Zhang Ling, she found that Zhang Ling was also frowning and shaking her head, as if she wanted to clear the lingering sounds in her ears. After a long time, Zhang Ling's side hall was pushed open. Zhang Ling shouted nervously, "Who is it? What are you doing?" It was her disciple Zhou Ping who came in. Zhou Ping was shocked and said, "Master, it's me." Zhang Ling had been disturbed for a whole day. She looked calm on the surface, but deep down she had already torn Li Yundong's body into pieces countless times. She had stayed up all day and her nerves were a little abnormal. When she saw that it was Zhou Ping, she breathed a sigh of relief and said, "It's you. Come in. How is it? How is everything else?" There were 2 Taoist priests behind Zhou Ping. She and the 2 Taoist priests looked at each other, and one of them, who was slightly fatter, said in a low voice, "Auntie, this is today's account list. Please take a look." Zhang Ling rubbed her temples with one hand and took the list with the other. She glanced at it and suddenly laughed. "Not bad, there's actually a 6-figure profit?" Zhou Ping said in a low voice, "Master, a lot of it is ticket income and some of it is food income." There was also a vegetarian cafeteria on Mount Longhu. Although it was vegetarian, it was much more expensive than many meat dishes. However, the students who came here to play didn't care about this. Some people just wanted to try something new and they had spent a lot of money on it. Zhang Ling couldn't help laughing and said proudly, "Li Yundong, how can you be the immovable wisdom king? You are clearly the boy of wealth." Zhou Ping and the 2 Taoist priests behind her looked at each other again. Zhou Ping swallowed hard, handed over another list and said, "Master, this is the list of losses." "Huh?" Zhang Ling was stunned and took a look. As soon as she saw it, Zhang Ling jumped 3 feet high and roared angrily, "What's going on with these 28 small incense burners being stolen? Also, what's going on with the other 31 walls being demolished?" Zhou Ping said with a tearless expression, "Master, some of the walls have been in disrepair for a long time. I don't know who dug out a brick from it, but it collapsed. As a result, many students picked up a brick and took it away, saying that they wanted to keep it as a souvenir. I couldn't stop them." Zhang Ling said angrily, "What about the incense burner? What's going on with the incense burner?" The slightly fat Taoist priest next to her carefully added, "Auntie, there are too many people who come to the temple to burn incense. We accidentally lost one. All the halls are the same and we couldn't find it. We can't search them one by one, can we?" Zhang Ling was so angry that she felt dizzy. Seeing that the other Taoist priest seemed to want to say something, she immediately pointed at him and said angrily, What do you want to say?" The Taoist priest shrank back and said timidly, "Great uncle, this list hasn't written yet. On the cultural relics, stone tablets and ancient trees of our Jingyi school, there are 238 words written or engraved with a pen and a knife." When Zhang Ling heard the Taoist priest's words, she was so angry that she almost spat out a mouthful of blood. She rushed out quickly, but after a few steps she stopped. Her heart was bleeding with hatred. These were the cultural relics and treasures of Mount Longhu. The last time it had been ruined like this was in the 70s. Zhang Ling was so angry that her vision turned dark and she almost fainted. At this time the other Taoist priests outside also came to the door of the main hall and said behind her, "Auntie, it's too noisy today. I can't cultivate even if I want to." That's right. It's the beginning of spring. Every second counts. Eldest Shiji, I still want to take this opportunity to break through to the Jinshin phase. Now that this is happening, how can I cultivate? Zhang Ling was annoyed by the noise. She shouted, "Stop arguing. Haven't they already gone down the mountain? It will be quiet at night. You can cultivate as you want." When everyone heard this, they also felt that it was reasonable and dispersed one after another. But as soon as they turned their heads, they suddenly heard a voice coming from the distance at the foot of the mountain. It was loud and clear, and it was clearly the amplified voice of a high-powered speaker. The voice was extremely emotional. "Students of Tiannan University, today we are gathered at the foot of Mount Longhu. The starry sky has witnessed our friendship, and the bonfire has witnessed our youth. Next, let us welcome Zhang Guofeng from the Department of Finance of Class 3 of the freshman year to bring us a classic old song. Let us sing and dance to our heart's content." When these Taoist priests heard this, they all burst into an uproar. What? After the noise during the day, it still won't stop at night? Also, who the hell wrote this line? Can you be any more melodramatic? I'm going to throw up just listening to it. Zhang Ling and the other Taoist priests did not dare to fly. They all jumped onto the roof beams of the side hall and looked down. Sure enough, there were bonfires and tents at the foot of the mountain, and a burst of noise came over them. Zhang Ling's eyes were fixed, and the veins on her forehead were throbbing. She clenched her fists so hard that they made cracking sounds. She took a deep breath and was about to speak when she heard an extremely distorted male voice shouting loudly and excitedly, "Sister, you sit at the bow. I'll walk on the shore." When these Taoist priests and nuns heard this, they almost fell off the roof, tears streaming down their faces. What the hell, trackers love? You're still King college students. Do you dare to sing a more fashionable song? It's fine if the song is not fashionable, but do you dare to sing the correct tune? It's fine if the tune is not correct, but do you dare to sing a woman's voice that is not pretentious? It's fine if you are a man singing a woman's voice, but do you dare to sing the lyrics correctly? That is a lovey-dovey rope swaying leisurely, not a lovey-dovey bed swaying leisurely. That is a little sister sitting at the bow of the boat, not a little sister sitting at the head of the bed. What kind of King college students are these? Singing in such a vulgar manner? Patriarchs of the Three Pure Ones, Great Emperor Tai Hao, please show some mercy and let the host who spoke so cliché come back. I can't hold it anymore. Chapter 953. Listening to the song, Zhang Ling trembled with anger. If it weren't for the fact that she knew that she couldn't beat him and the divine tribulation, she wouldn't have dared to attack him. Caozhang Lufeng listened to the revised lyrics with a strange expression on her face. She looked like she wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. When she heard the male student sing the most IG part, she finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She turned around and her shoulders kept shaking. The Taoist priests waited for the male student who had randomly changed the lyrics to finish singing. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. But before they could relax, they heard a girl come on stage and sing a song about the Tibetan plateau. Fortunately, the lyrics were not tampered with this time, but when she sang the most resounding part, Zhang Ling and the other Taoists were so moved that they wanted to poke their ears deaf. This was not singing, it was clearly killing chickens and ducks. CK sister, don't force yourself to sing if you can't sing it. You will break your voice, do you know that? What? My voice has already broken? Can you sing a song with a lower pitch? People should act according to their abilities. Damn, she really changed it. What? Tears in prison? Can you sing something more bitter? Oh my God, sister, continue singing the Tibetan plateau. I want to cry when I hear it. The students at the foot of the mountain were crying, and the Taoists on the mountain couldn't stand it anymore. After a while, a person appeared next to Zhang Ling. Zhang Ling looked at him and saw that it was Zhang Kongyun. She saw that Zhang Kongyun was surrounded by golden light, and his aura was much stronger than before. Obviously he had reached the Thunder Retribution realm. Zhang Ling was stunned, and then she was delighted. She said in a loud voice, "Junior brother Kongyun, congratulations. You've finally broken through to the Thunder Retribution realm." When the other Taoists saw this, they all came up to congratulate him. Zhang Lufeng also jumped in front of him happily, took his arm and said, "Master, you've finally broken through to the Thunder Retribution realm. You're amazing." Zhang Kongyun said angrily, "What are you congratulating me for? Where did this bastard come from, howling like a ghost and howling like a wolf? If it weren't for these bastards crying at the top of their lungs, I would have broken through to the 3rd level of the Thunder Retribution realm. Now I've only broken through to the 2nd level. When the crowd heard this, they became angry again and shouted, "Bastard, you actually made Uncle Kongyun's cultivation stagnate. Damn it." In a year, this was the most important period. If one wanted to break through to the Lightning Retribution realm, almost all cultivators would do it at this time. Moreover, if someone in a sect wanted to break through to the Lightning Retribution realm at this time, it would be a big event for the sect. If someone tried to stop or destroy it, it would be equivalent to cutting off one's source of wealth and obstructing one's career. Cultivators always looked forward to the day when they could cultivate to immortality. It was not easy for a year to compare to a few days. It was not easy for them to seize the opportunity to break through several stages of thunder tribulations in one go, but they were interrupted by this group of bastards. It was really infuriating. These Taoists clamored to go down the mountain to find trouble with these students, but soon someone pointed out that these students were backed by Li Wudi. What could they do to Li Wudi? When everyone thought of this, they became a little dispirited and gave up. In this day and age, although a strong fist might not necessarily be able to travel around the world, sometimes a strong fist had its own benefits. With a strong fist, the voice of others was also strong. At this time, there was also a Taoist priest who suggested that if these guys at the foot of the mountain could shout, why couldn't they shout? Everyone shouted together and see who could outshout who. There were many Taoist priests who were touched by good intentions, and they immediately agreed. At this time, Zhang Lufang also became excited. She had always been a person who liked to join in the fun, and she was afraid that the world would be stable. She also waved her arms excitedly and said loudly, "Yes, yes, let's shout together. I don't believe that we cultivators can't outshout those loudspeakers." As soon as she finished speaking, Zhang Kongyun knocked her on the head, causing her to cry out in pain. She covered her head and looked back at Zhang Kongyun with an aggrieved expression. "Master, why did you hit me?" But at this time Zhang Kongyun was still calm. After asking about the situation, he first glared at Zhang Lufang, and then said loudly, "Shixiang Shimi, don't be impatient. If we go to make trouble for them, we will really fall into Li Jiandong's trap." At this time, everyone calmed down a little and asked, "Shirshu Kongyun, what should we do?" Zhang Kongyun thought for a moment and said helplessly, "The calmer we should show, the more disappointed they will be. If we make trouble for a while, Li Jiandong will find that it's useless, and he will retreat by himself." Zhang Lufang, who was standing to one side, said boldly, "Will he retreat so easily?" She didn't believe that Li Jiandong would give up the plan to save Ziyuan so easily. Zhang Kongyun said, "Junrenli has great determination and wisdom. It's almost impossible for him to abandon the plan to save Ziyuan. But if he continues to make trouble here, he will definitely spend a lot of money every day. Li Jiandong will definitely not be able to hold on for long. Especially when he finds that it's useless, he will definitely retreat. Of course, I'm not talking about abandoning the rescue, but he should abandon this styles." When the people around heard this, they felt much more at ease. They would rather have a real fight with Li Jiandong than suffer such torment. Zhang Ling couldn't help nodding in appreciation. Hearing this, Zhang Ling couldn't help but nod her head in appreciation. "That's right, junior brother Kong Yun is right. Everyone should go back. As I said, let him be strong, let him be strong, the cool breeze caresses the hill." No matter how many times these words were said, they all felt that it was appropriate. Everyone nodded, and someone immediately praised, "Uncle Da and Uncle Kong Yun are right. It's our willpower that's too shallow." Zhang Ling smiled and was about to nod in relief when she heard a voice coming from the foot of the mountain. This voice belonged to the host who had said so many things before. This time, the abbot said in a clear voice, "Next, Senior Li Jiandong has specially ordered a song for us. It will be sung by Sun Li and Yen Wen from the 3rd class of the Chinese department of the 3rd year. Please don't cry tonight." The crowd burst into an uproar again. Damn, Li Jiandong did it on purpose. He definitely did it on purpose. He can't be so wicked as to sing this song, can he? Is he provoking us? The corner of Zhang Ling's eyes twitched violently. The blue veins on her forehead were crawling like snakes and she gritted her teeth. Zhang Kongyun hurriedly tried to persuade her again, calm down, calm down. Everything is just a fleeting flower in the eyes and a fleeting sound in the ears. It's all an illusion, an illusion." Zhang Ling also gritted her teeth and said, "All of you go back." Everyone was so scared that they quickly turned around and went back to their own houses. That night, they only heard these students making a ruckus for the entire night. It was only when dawn was about to break the next day that they finally stopped. When they stopped, these Taoist priests then bitterly prepared to go to sleep. But unexpectedly at this time, there were still students clambering up the mountain. The Taoist priests who came out to entertain and monitor them vigilantly, asked these students in shock, "Damn, don't you need to sleep?" But the answer of these students almost made them vomit blood. There were only about 200 people camping last night. These Taoist priests burst into tears. What the hell, there's still a shift. Wait, a shift? This means that there will be another concert tonight? When these Taoist priests thought of this, their legs and stomachs immediately began to tremble, and their ears began to cramp. They were not afraid of people singing all night, but no one could stop this group of people from singing. Sure enough, at night the singing came as scheduled. The Taoist priests up and down Mount Longhu all wanted to cry but had no tears. This lasted for 5 days. After being bombarded for a few days and nights, Zhang Ling and the others felt dizzy, and all they could hear was the distorted singing. She was waiting for these students to go down the mountain early at noon. After taking the opportunity to rest for a while, she suddenly heard another person rushing in with a bang. Zhang Ling finally had a break. She immediately bounced up from the bed like a spring and flew into a rage. "Bastard, can't you see that I'm resting?" The person who came was her disciple, Zhou Ping. Zhou Ping also had 2 dark circles under her eyes. Her face was filled with ecstasy. She pointed to the door and said in a trembling voice, "Master, they're finally gone." That voice and that expression was as if the new China had just been established. Zhang Ling stood up immediately. She was so excited that her whole body was shaking. What? These pests are finally gone? These past few days had really been a nightmare for them. During the day they had to be on tenterhooks to guard against these students who would cause damage and steal some tools. At night they had to suffer from their singing. This was supposed to be the golden time for cultivation, but it was all used for this. This was simply not a human life. At this moment Zhang Ling really felt like crying. She ran all the way out of the door, only to see the other Taoist priests also running out, as if they were serfs who had become masters. They ran to a high place and looked down from above. Sure enough, they saw a continuous stream of cars slowly driving away on the road. After all the cars had driven away, the Taoist priests on Mount Longhu immediately cheered, as if they had won an earth-shattering victory. The Taoist priests cheered and celebrated, tears streaming down their cheeks. "F***ck your mother, you bunch of shameless bastards, you finally scram far away from this Taoist grandpa." But these Taoist priests hadn't celebrated for long when they saw another motorcade in the distance, like a long dragon, driving over majestically. Zhang Ling and the rest were flabbergasted as they watched the convoy stop at the foot of the mountain. Following that, a large number of students jumped off, followed by a group of tour guides and student council members as well as school teachers, leading them up the mountain in a grandiose manner. When the students reached the top of the mountain, Zhang Ling and the rest were dumbstruck when they saw Li Yundong at the head of the group. Li Yundong looked at them with a smile and waved. "Everyone, we are here again. Tiannan University has more than 10,000 students, and this is only the second batch." At this moment, Zhang Ling and the Taoist priests around her suddenly felt like jumping off a cliff and committing suicide. Chapter 954. Zhang Ling stared blankly at these students. Some of them were holding the flags of the tourist group, while others were holding the flags of Tiannan University. They were really waving the red flags. At this moment, Zhang Ling really had a feeling that the whole world was covered with these damn little red flags. But this was not the most hateful thing. The most hateful thing was Li Yundong's smiling face. He had a gentle and polite expression on his face, just like a gentleman and a scholar. Even his sworn enemies couldn't help but praise him. He is elegant, modest, and graceful. But it was such a person who did such a thing that made people gnash their teeth in anger. Zhang Ling took a deep breath, suppressed her anger and said to Li Yundong, "Jinren, you're really good. You're ruthless. How dare you use fatigue bombing?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Jinren Zhang, I just want to save Ziyuan. Zhengyi School is the leading cultivation sect in the Chinese cultivation world. I don't want to have a conflict with you, but you insist on not letting her go, so I have to do this. I hope you can forgive me, Jinren Zhang." Li Yundong's soft and hard words made Zhang Ling's face look much better, but she had no intention of giving in. Zhang Ling snorted coldly and said, "Li Yundong, I know that you are a sentimental person and want to save Ziyuan to repay her for saving your life. I also respect your kindness. But let me tell you, dogma is dogma and sect rules are sect rules. If a sect doesn't have rules, then there won't be any order. If there is an order, then how can it stand in this world?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I understand. I know that you won't agree so easily, so I'm here again. As he spoke, he turned around and nodded to Zhou Qin and the others. Zhou Qin smiled slightly and led the second group of students up the mountain. Zhang Ling looked at the students passing by, gritted her teeth and said, Li Yundong, let's see who can't stand it first. After that, she snorted with a livid face and took the lead to turn around and leave. The other Taoists also left one after another. Zhang Lufang glanced at Li Yunyang with flickering eyes, then looked back at her master's back as he left. She couldn't help but sigh in her heart and had no choice but to leave behind them. Li Yundong looked at their backs and smiled confidently. Zhou Qin, who was beside him, asked worriedly, Master, will this really work? Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, How can I know if I don't try? Zhou Qin sighed softly and said, That will be hard on Ziyuan. Every day she stays in the formation she will suffer one more day. Master, will her life be in danger if she is locked in the Sanju formation? Li Yundong shook his head and said, No, although Zhang Ling's cultivation of spiritual power is not the best, she is an extremely smart woman. When she found out that Ziyuan had stolen the sun and moon flowing elixir, even in a rage she did not choose the most extreme punishment. She just sealed Ziyuan in the formation. At that time she could have killed Ziyuan. She had the reason and the right to do so, but she didn't. What? It was because Zhang Ling had vaguely guessed that this matter would have something to do with me at that time, so she didn't kill Ziyuan. Therefore she chose to lock Ziyuan in the Sanju formation because she didn't want to make a mess of things. She wanted to wait for a while and see the situation before making a decision. Li Yundong said slowly, If I hadn't come back to life, she would definitely have been rude to Ziyuan. Maybe she would have locked her up for the rest of her life. But now that I've come back to life, I definitely won't sit back and do nothing. Zhang Ling also knows this, but she can't tell anyone else. If she were to return him to me like this, how could she and the Jingyi school put their faces in front of others? Therefore Zhang Ling needs a reason to step down. Zhou Qin's expression was strange. She tried hard to hold back her laughter, as if she was thinking of the scene of the students taking turns to camp at the foot of the main peak of Mount Longhu these past few nights. Master, you don't have to do this, do you? Aren't you afraid that you'll go bankrupt? Li Yundong had moved the students of Tianan University here in turn to torment the Taoists of the Jingyi school. Although the effect was good, the cost was equally shocking. Although such a large-scale organization naturally needed the help of several travel agencies at the same time, and they also received the highest price discounts from these travel agencies, the daily cost was still a very frightening figure. Although Li Yundong had the Desanxian, at present, the shop of the Desanxian was being closed for investigation. Li Yundong and the others' economic income was almost zero. Therefore, even a mountain of gold would be eaten up every day, not to mention that Li Yundong didn't have much savings. If Zhou Qin hadn't contacted Shen Wankai and Li Yundong had temporarily borrowed 2 million yuan from him, he probably wouldn't even have had the money to launch this activity. Although Shen Wankai was rich and was Li Yundong's disciple, Li Yundong knew that it was easy to pay off a debt of money, but it was difficult to repay a debt of gratitude. As a master, if he owed too much to his disciple, how could he teach and guide him? Therefore, Li Yundong really didn't want to borrow money from Shen Wankai unless it was absolutely necessary, even though Shen Wankai had repeatedly stated that the money was a tribute to him. When Li Yundong heard Zhou Qin say this, he smiled and said, Zhou Qin, if I were locked inside, would you care so much to save me? Zhou Qin suddenly fell silent. She knew herself very well. If it was Li Yundong who was locked inside, the first thing she would do would be to find a way to go up the mountain. If the hard way didn't work, she would use the soft way. She would definitely do everything she could, even at the cost of her own life. Not to mention worldly possessions like money. Zhou Qin sighed softly in her heart and couldn't help but feel a little envious of Ziyuan. Her eyes drooped slightly, and a touch of sadness flashed across them, but she soon returned to normal. She smiled and said, Master, don't worry. With us here we will definitely be able to save Ziyuan. Li Yundong smiled, patted Zhou Qin on the shoulder and said, I hope so. At this time, Zhang Ling returned to her side hall angrily. Zhou Ping followed her step by step, and many disciples of the Jingyi school were also following her. Zhou Ping looked at Zhang Ling's dark face and couldn't help but persuade her, Master, do you want to tell the leader and let him come forward? Zhang Ling said angrily, What time is it now? Hasn't the leader been disturbed enough these days? Now is the best time for him to work hard to break through the 9th level of the Thunder Retribution. How can we go to him because of such a trivial matter? Zhang Kongyun, who was standing to one side, smiled bitterly and said, It's so noisy at the foot of the mountain. It's noisy during the day and at night. Even if he's in meditation, it's difficult to escape. I'm afraid that the leader will be affected. Zhang Ling's expression changed. She gritted her teeth and said, Li Yundong is too cruel. He wants to force us to give in. At this time Zhou Ping tentatively said, Master, how about, we call the police? Zhang Ling was furious. B****, call the police? Don't you think we've embarrassed ourselves enough? If other sects find out, how can we face others in the future? The dignified Jingyi school has been stirred up by a group of students, and we're going to call the police? It's really funny. Zhou Ping's face turned red and she didn't dare to say anything more. Zhang Ling thought for a while with a gloomy expression. Suddenly she thought of something and said, By the way, where are Deng Yu and Deng Jiao? Where are they? Zhou Ping said, They're all in the back hall. Zhang Ling stared at Zhou Ping and said, How have they been these days? Zhou Ping thought for a moment and said carefully, They've been chanting scriptures and meditating. They're very well behaved. She laughed and said, Master, you know their temperaments. They're very well behaved. How could they cause any trouble? Zhang Ling nodded slowly and said, That's good. In my opinion, the prestige of our Jingyi school will fall on the two of them. Zhou Ping was stunned and asked curiously, Master, why do you say that? Zhang Ling snorted. You'll know when the time comes. Zhou Ping thought for a moment and suddenly let out a cry. Her eyes lit up, but then a touch of worry appeared on her face. Master, I'm afraid this isn't good, is it? The two sisters, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, had never experienced a serious fight. What if something went wrong? What would they do? Master, why don't we let the leader? Zhang Ling immediately glared at her sternly. What did you say? Since when did you have the right to criticize the affairs of the Jingyi school? Zhou Ping's cheeks suddenly turned red. I'm sorry, Master. I just... Zhang Ling saw that Zhou Ping's eyes had also turned red in the past few days. Although she was also a cultivator couldn't stand being bombarded with fatigue for a few days and nights without rest. What's more, she was just a young girl with a low cultivation quotient. Even if she were to enter the secular world, she would only be a junior or senior female college student. Such a beautiful Taoist nun, who was originally a beautiful Taoist nun, now had 2 dark circles under her eyes, and her eyes were bloodshot. Zhang Ling's heart softened and she couldn't help but sigh. You're still thinking too simply. How could the sect leader's daughter easily fight with others? Even when the Heavenly Fox was born and the cultivation world was facing the danger of destruction, did the leader of the Chuanzhen Dragon sect show up? Did the leader of our Jingyi school show up? Zhang Ling earnestly lectured her disciple and said, Pinger, although our Jingyi school is now known as the best in the Chinese Taoist cultivation world, in fact, we are already strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Look at our whole school. There are a large number of Yang spirit masters, but there are only a few Jinshin masters, and the Thunder Retribution is even more pitiful. In the past, Shidi, the leader of the sect, and Wang Yuanshan secretly protected us, which was enough to protect the position of Mount Longhu. But in the Battle of Suyi, Wang Yuanshan actually died. The absolute love extinguishing array was destroyed. Now that the sun and moon flowing elixirs have been stolen, there are not many cards left in our hands. The only deterrent is Shidi, the leader of the sect. Zhang Ling's face was full of grief and worry. She said, Now there are other sects eyeing us covetously and wanting to replace us. Outside there is the Shantian sect plotting against us. This kind of internal and external dilemma is really a big dilemma that our Mount Longhu has never faced in thousands of years. If the leader fights with Li Yundong again at this time, not to mention how powerful Li Wudi is, even if the leader wins, it won't add much glory to our Mount Longhu. For thousands of years, there have been many masters who have returned from the foot of our Mount Longhu in defeat. We don't need a reincarnated wisdom king to add to our halo. But if we lose, then the ancestral foundation of the entire Mount Longhu will be shaken. Have you ever thought about this? Zhou Ping was stunned. She naturally knew a lot about what Zhang Ling had said, but she hadn't expected that the current situation of the Jingyi school had reached such a critical point. In her opinion, the Jingyi school was still extremely powerful. As long as they were given some more time, a large number of masters would grow up and become the core backbone of the Jingyi school. But now, the Jingyi school was facing such an embarrassing situation, and such a heavy burden could not be borne by the leader. Therefore, it could only fall on the shoulders of 2 young and delicate people. Zhou Ping had never thought that the 2 Bingdi lotuses she had casually picked up by the lotus pond in the cave of the Linggong sect would become the lifesaver of the Jingyi school. What was even more unexpected was that, the division and turmoil of the Jingyi school had also begun because of these 2 Bingdi lotuses. Chapter 955. In the back hall of the Jingyi school, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were sitting cross-legged in a yin-yang formation. They were sitting on the yin-yang formation eye of the formation, echoing each other from left to right. The elder sister, Deng Jiao, lowered her eyes slightly, as if she was meditating with her eyes closed, motionless. The younger sister, Deng Yu, looked a little restless. Her ears twitched from time to time as if she was listening to the noise outside. She opened her eyes from time to time and winked at her elder sister. Seeing that her elder sister did not move, she had no choice but to call out in a low voice, "Hey, elder sister, hey!" The 2,000 ruffians led by Li Yundong had tossed Mount Longhu into chaos. Even Zhang Kongyun, who was cultivating on the side peak next to them, couldn't hold on, let alone Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, who were in the back hall. Although there were talismans and magic circles that could soundproof in the world, their range was not large. Moreover, making such talismans and magic circles consumed a lot of spiritual energy and jinqi. At this time, in order to cultivate as fast as possible, Taoist priests were not even willing to spend a little more of their spiritual energy and jinqi. How could they spend their most precious things on these things? Moreover, when cultivating in this time of spring thunder, the yang spirit must go out of the body to absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. But once the yang spirit went out of the body, it would most likely break through the range of the soundproof talismans and magic circles. At that time, all the arrangements would be useless, and it would be a waste of time and jinqi. Therefore, although Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were in the magic circle, they could clearly hear the noise outside. Unfortunately, because of Zhang Ling's order, they could not take a step out of the magic circle. Otherwise, they would have rushed out to meet Li Yundong long ago. In the beginning, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were still a little conflicted. They were very restless in the depths of their hearts, and curiosity gnawed at their hearts crazily. However, as time passed, they slowly calmed down. They were no longer as curious and anxious as they were at the beginning. Deng Jiao had a gentle and peaceful temperament, so she could still hold on. However, her lively younger sister, Deng Yu, kept looking around and scratching her ears and cheeks. After a while, she couldn't help but whisper to Deng Jiao. Deng Jiao heard her sister's shout, but she didn't move at all. She still sat on the futon like a stone statue. Deng Yu felt strange in her heart. She carefully looked at her sister, Deng Jiao, and thought to herself, "No way. So powerful? How could she stay calm when it was so noisy outside? Isn't this too exaggerated?" Deng Yu couldn't help secretly admiring her sister. She knew that her sister liked to be quiet and not active, but she hadn't expected her sister to have such great concentration. In such a noisy environment, she could still meditate, especially when Li Yundong, whom they both cared about and admired the most, was outside. Sister can even meditate like this. Amazing. Truly amazing. No wonder Master Zhang Ling said that elder sister's cultivation would be higher in the future. Now, it seemed that it was indeed so. Deng Yu was secretly admiring him when she suddenly heard a burst of heavy breathing and a burst of light snoring coming from the side. Deng Yu listened carefully and almost fainted. The voice was coming from her sister, Deng Jiao. "Good heavens, I praised you for a long time, but you fell asleep?" Deng Yu was so angry that she gritted her teeth. She wanted to rush over and shake her sister awake, but she didn't dare to get up, let alone take a step. This was because Zhang Ling had specifically told them that once they entered a meditative state, they couldn't change their positions at will. The entire formation was filled with powerful spiritual power and jinqi. Except for the yin and yang formation eyes, the other places could be said to be impenetrable, not even a fly could land. Deng Yu clearly remembered that Zhang Ling had once thrown a sword into the activated formation in front of them. As a result, the powerful jinqi in the formation had instantly crushed the sword into countless pieces, only to make Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's pretty faces turn pale with fright. But the most frightening thing was not that the two of them couldn't move easily in the magic formation, but that Li Yundong had come not long after they had entered the magic formation, which made the two of them restless. If it weren't for the magic formation and Zhang Ling's strict order, they would have jumped out immediately. Deng Yu saw that her sister had not slept or rested for the past few days, so she was so tired that she had actually fallen asleep in meditation. Her head began to fall little by little, and her body was leaning forward little by little, which scared her so much that her hair stood on end. Deng Yu was afraid that her sister, Deng Jiao, would tilt and fall into the formation. If that happened, she would be instantly crushed into meat paste. Even God would not be able to save her, so she hurriedly shouted, "Sister! Sister, wake up! Sister, wake up, sister! Deng Jiao, Deng Jiao!" But no matter how she shouted, Deng Jiao never opened her eyes. Her head was still moving and her body was leaning more and more. Deng Jiao had been bombarded by the noise outside for the past few days. At this time she was extremely tired and fell asleep. How could she be woken up by Deng Yu's shouts? Deng Yu saw that her body was leaning more and more, and she was so scared that her face turned pale. She looked around and quickly thought of a solution. After glancing at the pair of blue cloth shoes on her feet, she immediately had an idea. She peeled off the shoes on her feet with both hands and threw them at Deng Jiao. The bottom of the shoes solidly smacked onto Deng Jiao's smooth and full forehead, causing her to cry out in shock. She was startled awake from her drowsy sleep. Deng Yu laughed out loud, convulsing with laughter. "Sister, do my feet smell good?" As she said that, she proudly raised one of her feet and dangled her jade-white foot in front of her, her 5 plump toes playfully scratching each other. Deng Jiao covered her forehead with one hand and picked up the cloth shoes with the other. She was so angry that she laughed and said angrily, "Sister, you're so annoying. You scared me to death. It stinks, it's really stinky feet." Deng Yu snorted and said, "Bah, you're the stinky feet. If I hadn't woken you up, I'm afraid that your body would have fallen into the magic formation and died. You won't be able to see Li Yundong again, let alone talk to him." Deng Jiao's pretty face turned slightly red and she said angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? I dare you to say it again." Deng Yu said with a smile, "How about it? Bite me? Come over and bite me." Deng Jiao raised the shoes in her hand angrily and was about to throw them away when she suddenly heard footsteps coming from outside the hall. Then a few figures flashed in front of the window. Deng Jiao was so scared that she quickly sat down. She looked around and wanted to hide Deng Yu's shoes, but there was nothing in the hall except for the towering statue in front of her. She had to lift her butt and hide the shoes under her rush cushion. In this magic formation, only the position of the rush cushion did not have any Jinqi flow, so this hiding did not cause any other abnormalities. Deng Yu also quickly hid his bare feet while sitting cross-legged. Then he used his Taoist robe to cover them up so that no abnormalities could be seen. After the two of them were done quickly, they saw the door open with a bang. Zhang Ling led a group of Taoist priests into the hall one by one. Zhang Ling's sharp eyes swept the hall. She saw Deng Yu and Deng Jiao sitting upright, dignified and solemn. She couldn't help but nod with satisfaction. In the past few days she had finally seen such a thing that made her a little happy. Li Yundong's tiresome bombardment really made the Jingyi school suffer to the extreme. After quarreling during the day, almost no one could cultivate normally. The 3-shift system of Tiannan University almost made the Taoist priests and nuns collapse. Many people could not stand it anymore and privately asked Zhang Ling if there was any other solution. Although Zhang Ling had always been indifferent to this kind of surrender, she also knew that she could not let Li Yundong continue to toss around endlessly. Even if Li Yundong did not toss around all the time, in about 10 days the golden period of cultivation would be over. If he wanted to cultivate again and break through the realm, it would be even more difficult. Moreover, this matter would definitely become the laughingstock of other sections. There might even be some people with ulterior motives who would use this method to deal with the Jingyi school. At that time it would be a real headache. Therefore, Zhang Ling knew that the Jingyi school would definitely make concessions in this matter, but this kind of concession would be extremely limited, and there might even be some sinister intentions. When Zhang Ling had locked Ziyuan in the Sanju formation, of course, she had not made this decision on a whim. At that time she had already had a premonition that Li Yundong might come to save Ziyuan, so she had deliberately locked Ziyuan in the Sanju formation. In case Li Yundong forcibly took her away, it would be impossible for him to take Ziyuan away unless he could break the Sanju formation. Therefore this was the trump card that Zhang Ling had left behind. Zhang Ling was now extremely glad that she had not been impulsive at that time. She was even more glad that she had made a wise decision to seal Ziyuan in the Sanju formation. Otherwise she might really be embarrassed this time, and the Jingyi school would also be notorious. In her opinion, no matter how powerful Li Yundong was, it was impossible for her to break the Sanju formation. Even Wang Yuanshan, with his magical powers, did not dare to enter the formation of the Shintian sect. When it was time to admit defeat, she would immediately admit defeat without hesitation. Although Li Yundong's cultivation had reached the peak, the Sanju formation specialized in restraining all kinds of top experts. Even a golden immortal master would have to admit defeat if he entered the formation. However, no matter how powerful the formation was, it was still activated by people. In particular, the Sanju formation was directly dependent on the yin and yang sword souls. If the sword soul was cold-blooded, the formation would be indestructible. If the sword soul had compassion, then the formation would be in danger of being broken. Zhang Ling was not a fool. She knew that when Zhou Ping brought Deng Yu and Deng Jiao to her, the origin of this pair of Bingdi lotus was a little unclear. But after such a long time, it was impossible for her not to know anything about it. Especially when the pair of Bingdi lotus talked about Li Yundong, their eyes shone with admiration, which made Zhang Ling even more vigilant and impressed. Therefore, in order to prevent the two sword souls of the Sanju formation from showing mercy in the formation, she had specially set up a temporary formation. The power of this formation was extremely powerful. Not only could it summon the past immortal ascension masters of the Jingyi school, but it could also make the spiritual power of the people in the formation unprecedentedly strong. But the most important thing was that when the divine souls of the victims were possessed, their past divine senses and memories would be shielded and concealed for a short period of time. This also meant that when fighting in the magic formation, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao would definitely not show mercy to Li Yundong, because at this time they did not know Li Yundong at all. Chapter 956. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao looked at Zhang Ling timidly. They both knew that Zhang Ling was strict and had a high prestige in the Jingyi school. Except for the sect leader, Celestial Master Zhang, although some of the others had higher cultivation than Zhang Ling, no one dared to disobey her. They knew that if Zhang Ling knew that one of them had fallen asleep in the magic formation and almost died, and the other had been playing around with a cloth shoe, she would definitely be scolded severely. Therefore, one of them kept moving her body, as if what she was sitting on was not a cloth shoe, but a brazier. The other one always wanted to pull the tail of her Taoist robe, as if she wanted to cover her bare foot. Zhang Ling saw that their expressions were a little strange, and their bodies were constantly twisting slightly. She had been very restless in the past few days, so she did not take their abnormal behavior to heart. She only thought that it was their first time entering this kind of magic formation and their first time receiving the god's vanquishing spell, so she was a little nervous. Almost every Taoist sect had a Shintong. This kind of Shintong was not compatible with the Shintong of Lin Youfa's Divine Fist sect. The Shintong of Divine Fist sect mostly invited the gods of the heavens, while the Shintong of Jingyi school and other Taoist sects invited the ancestors who had ascended to heaven. To invite the gods of the heavens to possess one's body, one needed a very strong body. Moreover, the divine power of the gods was not something that ordinary people could bear. Unless one was the reincarnation of a god, if an ordinary person invited a god to possess one's body, it would more or less cause irreversible damage to the caster. This was why the Shintong of Divine Fist sect seemed to be very strong, but in fact, it was not valued by the Chinese Taoist sects, and was even regarded as a non-mainstream sect. This kind of Shintong was even more non-mainstream. Only those who did not enter the mainstream would use this kind of Shintong to kill 10,000 enemies and damage 3,000 oneself. Respectfully inviting the ancestors of the past to possess one's body was another matter. The first generation of patriarchs were mostly immortals, not gods. They could not withstand the power of god force, but the same could not be said for immortal force. Moreover, the patriarchs and the users of the technique were mostly from the same sect. Their cultivation of divine arts, magic power, and true essence were all from the same source. Thus, it was easier for the user to accept the technique, allowing them to display 100% of their strength. Lin Youfa had once invited Marshal Tianping and the Holy Emperor Guan, who was far away in the Tianzuan phase, to fight with him, but in the end they couldn't even defeat Li Yundong, who hadn't even reached the Zhuji phase. Instead, they were defeated by Su Chan once and his arm was broken by Li Yundong once. If this kind of god-inviting spell could bring out a god's 100% strength, wouldn't it mean that even the head god of the Big Dipper and warrior Saint Guan Yu couldn't defeat an ordinary person who hadn't reached the foundation-building realm? This was simply the biggest joke in the world. However, the immortal arrival formation of the Jingyi school was not suitable. Once the patriarchs of each generation possessed them, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao would be able to transform into extremely powerful golden immortal masters within a certain period of time. Zhang Ling also knew that if only Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, these two golden immortal masters, were to fight face-to-face with Li Wudi, who had fought in hundreds of battles and forced the gods and Buddhas to retreat with one palm, the result would be one word: defeat. However, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were the sword souls of the Triultimate's array, and the array itself was a massive lever. Even if they were weak, they could still unleash an astonishing might from the Triultimate's array. But if they were golden immortal experts, then with the addition of the array as a massive lever, the might they could unleash was truly unimaginable. Archimedes, give me a fulcrum and I can pry up the whole earth. The relationship between the triple ultimate formation and Deng Yu and Deng Jiao was just like this sentence. Zhang Ling firmly believed that Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, who were in the triple ultimate formation, were absolutely invincible. Even if the gods descended to the mortal world, they would still be crushed into powder. Thinking of this, Zhang Ling's spirit was lifted. She turned to the few Taoist priests beside her and said, "Get ready." The few Taoist priests did not say a word. Their figures flashed, and they stood in the four corners of the great night hall, their hands forming incantations. Zhang Ling said to Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, "Are you ready?" Deng Yu and Deng Jiao saw that Zhang Ling did not notice their previous abnormality, and hurriedly nodded. Zhang Ling nodded in satisfaction. She waved her sleeve and shouted, "Activate the formation." The Taoist priests standing in the four corners began to chant incantations. For a moment, the formation of the great night hall shone brilliantly, and divine light shot up to the sky. Fortunately, it was daytime, and a beam of white light shot up to the sky from the great night hall. It was not very conspicuous. Otherwise, if the rebellious students of Mount Longhu saw it, they would immediately turn the sky upside down. This beam of light shot straight into the sky, breaking through the clouds in the sky, as if it had forcibly torn a gap on the border between the heaven realm and the mortal realm. From this gap, one golden figure after another was faintly discernible in the clouds. After these figures appeared one by one, two figures suddenly flew down from the beam of light. The speed at which the two figures descended was extremely fast, as if they were two beams of white light. The two beams of white light shot into the great night hall's array formation like sharp arrows and immediately turned into countless beams of white light that converged within the yin-yang array formation. The light within the array formation flowed and rotated. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were sitting cross-legged in the middle of the formation. At first, their eyes were still closed, but both of them could hear the strong wind blowing in their ears, and the sound of whispering came from the wind. It sounded like chanting coming from a faraway place. The two of them curiously opened their eyes, and saw the white light flowing around them. Divine light overflowed from their feet, rising and falling like the waves of the sea. The two of them were dazzled by what they saw. At this moment, the white light and the overflowing divine light converged towards the two eyes of the formation, and then through the eyes, they were transmitted upwards. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's bodies immediately trembled, and they felt an incomparably large amount of power being transmitted into their bodies. Their blood vessels felt like boiling lava, and their entire bodies felt like they were on fire. Zhang Ling stared at the two of them with her large eyes, for fear that they would make a mistake. But at this moment, no matter if it was Deng Yu, Deng Jiao or Zhang Ling, or the Taoist priests surrounding the Great Night Palace, none of them noticed that under the praying mat beneath Deng Jiao, there was a thick and solid nano-layered Sal's cloth shoe that forcibly blocked a portion of the white light and divine light from flowing into Deng Jiao's body. One of the most important reasons why the Taoist priests and monks chose to sit on praying mats woven from grass and leaves instead of praying mats woven from other tools was that praying mats had a strong air permeability. When cultivators were cultivating, the Huyin acupoint was an extremely important acupoint. Not only could it absorb the qi of the earth, but it could also expel waste gas from the body, so that the qi of the upper and lower parts of the body, the qi of heaven and earth, and the qi of the inside and outside of the body could be fused. If they were sitting on an airtight praying mat, the qi would be blocked and the qi would stagnate. The cloth shoes Deng Yu was wearing were handmade by the Taoist priests of the Jingyi school. This kind of cloth shoes was very different from ordinary handmade cloth shoes. Not only did these Taoist priests have to meditate and cultivate, but most of the time, they also had to refine their fleshly bodies, practice body-strengthening techniques and patrol around Mount Longhu. They even had to wear them on long journeys to cultivate their foundation. This kind of cloth shoes was extremely hard. An ordinary person would not be able to leave a scratch on the soles of the shoes even if they used a knife. This showed the level of hardness of the cloth shoes. Deng Jiao did not know that the cloth shoes she had casually hidden under her body had forcibly blocked a portion of the spiritual power and jinqi from entering her body. It had also blocked a portion of the spiritual sense and soul of the two grandmasters of the Jingyi school that had been invited by the spirit-inviting spell. No matter how powerful Zhang Ling was, she could not have expected that there would be such a loophole in her carefully prepared and foolproof plan. In particular, she never expected that there would be a white light lingering around the Great Night Hall formation, neither dispersing nor converging. This was actually a portion of the jinqi and soul that had not completely entered Deng Jiao's body. As the saying goes, there is a loophole in 100 secrets. Just as she was preparing her final trump card, the students of Tiannan University, led by Li Yundong, had already changed 4 batches of people. After the last batch of students came to Mount Longhu for a few days, It had already entered the Qingming festival. The ancients had a poem. During the Qingming festival, the rain was heavy, and the passers-by on the road were heartbroken. Mount Longhu in Jiangxi was originally a place with plenty of rain. When it came to the Qingming festival, it would rain almost all day long. The air humidity suddenly increased, and even cultivators would feel as if there was a layer of water hanging all over their bodies, which was extremely uncomfortable. Cultivators were most afraid of moisture entering their bodies. It was already extremely difficult to cultivate in such a season. If they wanted to go through the thunder retribution, it would simply be a fool's dream. Li Yundong had made a lot of trouble in Mount Longhu, which had forcibly delayed the cultivation of the entire Jingyi school for a long time. It really made the people of the Jingyi school miserable. They were so depressed that they wanted to vomit blood. If it weren't for the fact that they really could not beat Li Yundong, they would have already torn him into pieces. As the saying goes, cutting off one's way to wealth is like killing one's parents. Businessmen pursued profits and cultivators pursued inexhaustible power. Li Yundong's approach was really sinister and vicious. The people of the Jingyi school were all resentful. They looked at the students of Tiannan University with green eyes. If looks could kill, the students of Tiannan University would have died hundreds of times over. No matter how painful a nightmare was, there would be an end one day. When the Qingming festival came, Li Yundong was finally ready to stop. He looked at the Taoists of Jingyi school in front of him, who were staring at him angrily. With a smile on his face, he said something that almost made them jump off the cliff together. "Everyone will see you next year." Zhang Lufeng, who admired Li Yundong, almost fainted when she heard this. She exclaimed, "What? Come again next year?" Li Yundong looked around and saw that there was no one else around, so he said with a smile, "Of course, as long as Ziyuan is not rescued, I will not abandon her. If she is not rescued for a year, I will bring people to Mount Longhu every year at this time to burn incense and worship the gods." Zhang Lufeng patted her forehead and groaned in pain, "Oh my God, just kill me now." Zhou Ping's face showed anger and she shouted, "Li Yundong, don't dig deep into the soft soil." Li Yundong didn't wait for her to finish speaking and interrupted her, "Everyone goodbye." Zhou Ping was so angry that smoke was coming out of her 7 orifices. Just as she was about to speak, she saw Li Yundong turn around and leave. The Taoists of Jingyi school were furious and said at the same time, "Brothers of the Tao, will Li Yundong come again next year? What should we do? Will we still be able to cultivate? Will we still be able to live?" While they were talking angrily, a loud voice suddenly came. It was Zhang Ling's extremely satisfied voice. "Jinrenli, take care. I have something to say." Chapter 957. When Li Yundong heard Zhang Ling's voice, his heart skipped a beat and he turned around. The teachers and students of Tiannan University behind him had all gone down the mountain at this time. Only a few people were looking at Li Yundong, as if they didn't understand why he hadn't gone down the mountain yet. Li Yundong looked in the direction of Zhang Ling's voice, only to see her walking towards him with a smile on her face. Her smile was full of confidence and she looked radiant and energetic. Compared to the way she had been tortured over the past few days, she looked like a completely different person. Li Yundong thought to himself. Li Yundong's heart trembled, but his face remained calm. He still smiled and asked, "Jinren Zhang, I haven't seen you for a few days. You look radiant and in good spirits." Zhang Ling snorted angrily in her heart and said with a fake smile, "You flatter me." "Thanks to you, Jinren Li," Li Yundong said with a smile. "What are you talking about? I don't deserve it. However, Jinren Zhang has been really caring for us these past few days and I'm really grateful. At this time next year, I will come to visit you with my classmates." Zhang Ling snorted, and the smile on her face became more and more strange. She said with a faint smile, "Jinren Li, you're too polite. Our Longhu mountain can't afford it. How about this, Jinren Li, you don't have to bother us. Don't you want to save Ziyuan? Okay, I'll let you save her." Li Yundong was shocked. Even a great Jinren with profound cultivation and shrewdness couldn't help but be moved and show a look of ecstasy. But this was only a momentary change. Soon he laughed and said, "Jinren Zhang, do you agree? If you agree earlier it will save you and me trouble, won't it?" Zhang Ling sneered and said, "Jinren Li, don't be happy so early. Do you think you can take her away so easily?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Jinren Zhang Ling, if you have any Tao, just draw it. I'll take it." Zhou Qin, who had been watching Li Yundong, suddenly exclaimed, "No." Her cry shocked the other teachers and students who had not left. They all looked at them. Zhou Qin's eyes quickly swept over them and she came to Li Yundong's side. She lowered her voice and said, "Master, you can't agree so easily." Zhang Ling came prepared. She must be prepared. Be careful. You can't have anything happen to you. Li Yundong had been saved by Ziyuan and had come back to life. For Zhou Qin this was like going from hell to heaven. When she thought of the hazy, terrifying and cold days, she shuddered. She couldn't believe how she had survived. Zhou Qin absolutely did not want to see Li Yundong die in front of her again. She also did not want Li Yundong to think of a way to save Ziyuan at the risk of his life. That would be the most terrible nightmare. Zhou Qin's eyes seemed calm, but Li Yundong could see the deep trembling and fear in her eyes. This was a kind of infatuation and palpitation that came from deep and bitter love. This kind of gaze was the one that Li Yundong had shown after Zhou Qin's legs had recovered. She had thought that Li Yundong would leave her after she recovered and had committed suicide by jumping off a building upstairs. He knew very well in his heart that Zhou Qin loved him very deeply. This kind of love, which was close to obsession and madness, made a proud and outstanding woman like her endure the torture of jealousy and the pain of secret love, just to stay by his side, to look at him one more time and to listen to him one more time. That was enough. Li Yundong looked at Zhou Qin's silent eyes and looked at the deep love in them. He couldn't help but tremble in his heart. His voice suddenly softened as he whispered, "Don't be silly. If you were locked in the magic formation, you know that I would also come to save you at all costs." These words almost instantly turned Zhou Qin's heart into a gurgling spring water. It seemed that all the waiting and sacrifice she had made in the past was just for this sentence. Everything was worth it. At this moment, Zhou Qin suddenly had the urge to throw herself into Li Yundong's arms and burst into tears, but she didn't, because she knew that there were still many people watching them. She was Li Yundong's disciple, not his girlfriend, let alone his lover. Zhou Qin's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong. There was a storm in her chest, like thunder rolling, but her face was calm as usual. Only more and more tears were rolling in her eyes. Zhou Qin wiped away her tears, smiled, and said in a trembling voice, "I know, Master. I know. But I just don't want to see you again. As Zhou Qin said this, she couldn't go on any longer. Li Yundong looked at Zhou Qin with gentle eyes. He sighed softly in his heart and raised his hand, wanting to gently stroke Zhou Qin's long black hair. However, when his hand was raised into the air, it finally fell on her shoulder. Li Yundong said softly, "Don't worry, I won't die so easily. I promise you I will come back alive." Zhou Qin smiled with tears in her eyes and said, "Well, Master, this is what you promised. Even if it's not for me, for Su Chan, you have to come back alive, okay?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and nodded. "It's a deal." The two of them talked as if there was no one else around. Zhang Ling, who was watching from one side, sighed in her heart. Since ancient times, most cultivators have paid attention to pure hearts and few desires, and some have even been ruthless and abstinent. Looking at the Chinese cultivation world, I'm afraid that only Lu Dongbin, who is known to be involved in wine, women, avarice and temper, can compare with him. Lu Dongbin had been a romantic all his life. When he was traveling in the world, he had fought in the bedroom with countless women, but he had never lost. He could also be called an extraordinary person in the Chinese cultivation world. Although Li Yundong was also a romantic person like Lu Dongbin and had tender feelings for the fairer sex, he was much more devoted than Lu Dongbin, especially in the ancient battle of Mount Tianlong. For Su Chan, he didn't hesitate to commit suicide. This feeling was really touching. Even a cultivator like her, who had always been indifferent to feelings and whose heart had long been like a dry well, was deeply shocked by it. Zhang Ling could see that Li Yundong was no longer the Yuanyang boy from before. Although he was no longer a Yuanyang boy, his Dharma power and Jinqi did not retreat, but advanced instead. They were more powerful than before. Moreover, he was hard and soft, and yin and yang helped each other. He had the fierce and explosive fierceness of the past, but he had the lasting strength. His fighting strength was really terrifying. If it weren't for the 3-Ju formation of the Jingyi school and the trump card of Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, she really wouldn't have dared to compete with Li Yundong in fighting. However, admiration was admiration. After all, she and Li Yundong were from different sections. Although sometimes they could sit down quietly and say a few words, most of the time, they represented the interests of their respective sections. They talked and sparks flew in all directions, not giving in to each other. Zhang Ling admired Li Yundong's infatuation and profound Dharma power. In fact, Li Yundong also admired Zhang Ling's stubbornness and persistence. Li Yundong's cultivation had reached the peak, and he could be called the first person in the world. If one wanted to stay calm in front of him, it was absolutely impossible without great determination and courage. Zhang Ling silently watched Li Yundong and Zhou Qin talk. When he turned around, she asked, "Jinren Li, have you finished what you should have said?" Li Yundong smiled and said to Zhou Qin, "Take the students and teachers back first. I've caused you a lot of trouble this time. I guess your father will be angry when he hears about what I've done. Apologize to him for me." Zhou Qin had also proposed to use the power of her father, Li Yuanbua, and even Qin Wankai to put pressure on the Jingyi school to let Ziyuan go back, but this proposal was quickly rejected by Li Yundong. Not to mention that Li Yundong was now the strongest person in the world by default in the cultivation world. If he wanted to save a person, it would be a joke if he used the power of the government. At that time, all the glorious deeds he had done would immediately collapse. Just look at the attitude of the country towards the cultivation world. They would never get involved in this kind of thing. As long as the cultivation sects did not affect the normal secular world, they would be happy to see it. If they helped Li Yundong save Ziyuan, the prestige of the Jingyi school would collapse. This kind of thing would do more harm than good for them. Moreover, Li Yuanbua and Zhou Kachang were now senior provincial officials. The state's control over provincial officials was extremely strict. If any senior official above the provincial level had too much entanglement with religious people, he would be discarded. Not to mention using his power to help Li Yundong get Ziyuan back. This was simply courting death. Their political enemies would be happy to use this to stab them. In the land of the Celestial Empire, corruption and book chasing was sometimes not a very serious problem. Which official didn't have some dirty things under his butt? Weren't they still enjoying their lives just as much as before? Those who should be greedy continued to be greedy, and those who played with women continued to play. Those who did bad things were often exposed because they were too high profile, or they were caught in a political struggle. At this time, corruption and book chasing was a deadly sin. But what was even more terrifying than these things were actually ideological issues, and religious issues were precisely ideological issues. In this matter, the Celestial Empire had never been soft-hearted. They would rather kill the wrong person than let go. Yi Dao, Phelan and Hong Ji many years ago were vivid examples. Li Yundong had already made a lot of noise recently. At this time, if he went to find Zhou Kachang again, it would be like sending a gun into the hands of Danghua. Then he would shout, "I'm going to ascend to immortality. Come and kill me." Li Yundong could ascend and escape, but what about the people around him? Zhou Qin also knew that her proposal was not reliable at all, but she had to mention it because she had to make a stand. Whether Li Yundong accepted it or not was his business. Seeing that Li Yundong was still thinking about these things at this time, Zhou Qin couldn't help but feel her heart soften and warm. She forced a smile, wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and said, "Master, take care. I'll go down the mountain first. I'll wait for you at the foot of the mountain. As long as you don't come back, I won't leave." Li Yundong looked at her helplessly. He knew that his disciple was stubborn and would not shed tears until she saw the coffin. Sometimes she couldn't change what she had decided. Li Yundong sighed, turned his face and said to Zhang Ling, "Jinren Zhang, let's go." Zhang Ling smiled slightly and led the way to the back of Mount Longhu. At first, the two of them walked slowly. When they were out of the sight of the teachers and students of Tianan University, Zhang Ling jumped up and rushed toward the back of the mountain like lightning. Li Yundong didn't seem to take any steps. He just took a normal step and appeared more than 10 meters away. He was close to Zhang Ling and didn't fall behind at all. Zhang Ling quickly took Li Yundong to the cliff at the back of the mountain. She turned her head to look at Li Yundong and said meaningfully, "Li Yundong, you have to think it through. This is the Sanju formation of our Jingyi school. It's a dangerous place, the abyss of hell. If you jump down, it will be too late to regret." Li Yundong smiled. He didn't wait for Zhang Ling to jump down, but he jumped down first. Chapter 958. As soon as Li Yundong jumped off the cliff, his body froze in mid-air. He only needed to take a look to see that there were two long swords inserted into the steep cliff wall. On the hilts of the swords stood two slender and elegant figures. The two women looked exactly the same. They stood side by side, their toes gently touching the hilts of the swords. A gust of wind blew. Although they were wearing Taoist robes, they still exuded a delicate and pretty aura. Their figures were light, as if they were about to fly away with the wind. Li Yundong saw that the two women were extremely familiar. He took a closer look and found that they were the former sisters, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao. Li Yundong was shocked. Although he had gone up Mount Longhu several times, he had either sneaked up the mountain or been on the mountain with many people. At the inauguration ceremony of the Lingong sect, although he and Deng Yu and Deng Jiao had been present at the same time, Li Yundong's attention had been focused on Takahashi Shota and the other Japanese, Ziyuan, Suchan and the others. Although Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were a pair of beautiful flowers, they were inexperienced and there were thousands of cultivators present. Naturally they could not stand at the front. Therefore although they saw Li Yundong he did not see them. When Li Yundong suddenly saw Deng Yu and Deng Jiao he was immediately overjoyed. He suddenly remembered that he had met the two sisters on campus when he was in school, and he remembered the tragic situation of the sisters when he had met them at the Xinyuan Hotel. Then he had chased after young Master He in anger, which had led to the divine tribulation. Since then his life had completely changed. He had completely changed from an ordinary student to a cultivator. Who would have thought that when they met on campus a year ago, one was a popular student on campus, and the other two were pure and innocent sisters. But now, one of them was the invincible Li Wudi, and the other two were the sword spirits of the Sanju array of the Jingyi school. The vicissitudes of life really made people sigh with emotion. Li Yundong was ecstatic and sighed. He couldn't help but say happily, Deng Yu? Deng Jiao? I didn't expect you to still be alive. Unexpectedly, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao stared at Li Yundong with extremely sharp eyes. They didn't say a word and their eyes were full of hostility. Li Yundong was stunned and vaguely felt that something was wrong. He turned his head to look at Zhang Ling who had quickly followed him and said in an unfriendly tone, Jinren Zhang, what's going on? Zhang Ling chuckled and said, Jinren Li, don't waste your time. I know you have a good relationship with them. Don't try to get close to them. Li Yunyang was slightly angry and he asked in a cold voice, Jinren Zhang, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao are my classmates and my friends. Back then the two of them fell off a building and died. Although I don't know why they came back to life here, I don't want them to be involved in this matter. Zhang Ling shook her head and said, Jinren Li, it's too late. If it was still that ordinary youngster, I could give them some face and let the two of them go down the mountain. But unfortunately no, it's the invincible Li Wudi, and they are the disciples of our Jingyi school. Now they are the two sword souls of the Sanju formation. How could I let them go? As Zhang Ling said this, her tone suddenly changed. She smiled slightly and said, Besides, Jinren Li, don't you think it's wonderful? They used to be classmates and friends but now they are fighting each other. Is this fate or fate? Li Yundong couldn't help but say angrily, What **t fate, what **t fate? Don't you think it's despicable and shameful to put the burden of Jingyi school on the shoulders of the two of them? How long have they been cultivating? How high are their cultivation quotients? Although Zhang Ling's cultivation quotient was not as good as Li Yundong's, she was not afraid of him when it came to bickering. Zhang Ling sneered and said, You forced me to do this. If it were me, would I have a better way? Li Yundong was speechless when he heard this. Although his cultivation quotient had reached the peak and he was invincible in fighting, he was not a person who relied on his fists to run amok. On the contrary, he was a person who could distinguish right from wrong and was reasonable. He valued affection and righteousness, kept his promises, persuaded good people to do good, hated evil as if it were his enemy, and helped the weak eliminate the violent. He did not use his profound spiritual energy to bully others, and he did not use his invincible fighting methods to suppress others. This was the strange charm of Li Yundong. This was also the reason why even though he had done many things that shocked the world and had conflicts with various cultivation sects and were hostile to each other, many people were still in awe of him. Even Zhang Ling, who had disliked Li Yundong very much in the past, now looked at him with new eyes and admired him in her heart. Hearing Zhang Ling's words, Li Yundong also understood that the current situation of the Jingyi school was really forced. If he had been in Zhang Ling's position and did not have such profound spiritual energy and cultivation quotient, he would probably have made the same choice as her. This was to say, one's position determined one's brain, and one's position determined one's thinking. Li Yundong took a deep breath and stopped arguing with Zhang Ling. He said, Jinren Zhang, since we have our own masters, don't blame me for being rude later. Zhang Ling snorted and said, Jinren Li, please do as you please. If we can break this magic formation, our Jingyi school will naturally admit defeat. After that, she turned to Deng Yu and Deng Jiao and shouted, Sanju formation, set up. Clang clang clang. In an instant, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao moved, and the long swords under their feet seemed to be pulled out by two invisible arms. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's figures also slowly moved out with the long swords, and then the whole cliff began to tremble. When the long swords were completely pulled out, there was a rumbling sound on the cliff. The huge rock, which had been closed, immediately opened to both sides, revealing a huge cave. One could only faintly see fluorescent lights flashing one after another inside the cave, endlessly extending inside, making the cave look extremely deep and gloomy. Li Yundong's eyes narrowed, and he saw a vague figure in the cave at a glance. His heart immediately shook and he subconsciously wanted to rush in, but as soon as he moved, he saw countless sharp blades appearing around him. These sharp blades were like countless soldiers in armor, surrounding Li Yundong. As long as he made any strange movements, the long swords would immediately come out of their sheaths, creating a sword light and sword shadow, and chop Li Yundong into meat sauce. Li Yundong was stunned, and then his eyes narrowed slightly. His eyes shot straight at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao like sharp swords. He said slowly, "Deng Yu, Deng Jiao, do you really want to be my enemy? Do you really not recognize me at all?" Li Yundong had fought countless battles, and his cultivation had already reached the transcendent realm. He had long cultivated an extremely amazing momentum and aura. At this time his face was expressionless. Although his voice was not loud and his tone was very calm, it revealed a kind of power without anger, which made people tremble in fear. If Deng Yu and Deng Jiao hadn't practiced in the magic formation, they would have been overwhelmed by Li Yundong's majesty at this moment. The power of the magic formation would not even be able to exert half of its power, and it would be broken in an instant. But at this time, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao both had the divine senses and power of the ancestors of the Jingyi school in their bodies. Not only had their cultivation reached the terrifying golden immortal realm in a short period of time, but they also had extremely rich experience in fighting. The two of them seemed to not hear Li Yundong's voice. They just stared at him coldly without a trace of humanity in their bodies. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were twin lotus flowers on one branch. They were sisters and had the same mind. When the two of them controlled the magic formation, the power was really terrifying. As soon as they thought of this, the countless sharp blades on both sides of Li Yundong rushed toward him like a storm. Li Yundong had experienced countless battles and even fought with all the gods and Buddhas. Naturally, he was not afraid of such a scene. He was not in a hurry. He pinched his fingers and slowly walked toward the magic formation. Zhang Ling saw that there was no trace of golden light around Li Yundong, but when the countless sharp blades around him hit him, she could clearly see traces of golden ripples bouncing off the sharp blades. The dense sharp blades almost covered Li Yundong's whole body, without any blind spots. At this time, if a master of lightning retribution was here, he would probably be chopped into meat paste. However, Li Yundong seemed to be taking a leisurely stroll. He just pinched his hands and slowly walked toward the stone cave. His figure was in midair, and with every step he took, a lotus bloomed behind him. Soon the lotus grew, bloomed, withered, declined and finally disappeared without a trace. Zhang Ling couldn't help but admire Li Yundong in her heart when she saw that he was able to move so easily and every step he took was like a Buddha in the world or a golden immortal descending to the world. But she also knew that this was only the joint attack of Deng Yu and Deng Jiao outside the Three-Ju formation. Their real strength could only be seen in the magic formation. The magic formation was a huge device. It could contain the power of hundreds or even thousands of cultivators. Therefore, the higher the cultivation of the person in charge of the magic formation, the greater the power of the magic formation. Li Yundong strolled all the way to the entrance of the cave. As soon as he stepped into the stone cave, he immediately heard a buzzing sound in his ears. His vision went black as if he had entered another world, and he could hardly see anything. Li Yundong's cultivation had long been able to make him see in the dark as if it were day, but at this time, there was suddenly darkness in front of him, as if he had suddenly lost his sight. It made him want to look back and see if it was the way he had come. However, Li Yundong knew that there were three realms of fighting. The first one was about the superiority of Shintong and treasures. The second one was about the superiority of Dharma power and Shintong. And the third one was about the superiority of realm and Taoist heart. There was suddenly darkness in front of his eyes. It must be the abnormality of stepping into the three ultimate formation. If he had a little bit of Taoist heart, he would immediately be smashed to pieces, and the tragedy of body and soul would be destroyed. He absolutely could not be careless. Li Yundong's heart was as calm as still water. He immediately stood still, holding the Buddha's hand gesture in his hand, and reciting the mantra of 9 words, "Hey!" This shout was like a sharp golden sword cutting through the thick dark clouds, immediately causing the air around Li Yundong to tremble violently. Li Yundong's eyes suddenly lit up, and the darkness disappeared in an instant. As soon as Li Yundong focused his eyes, he saw Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, both with cold expressions, holding 2 3-foot-long Qingfeng swords in their hands, stabbing towards him from both sides. The two swords were as fast as lightning and as fierce as thunder. As soon as Li Yundong saw it clearly, he saw that the tip of the sword had already reached his skin, making all the hair on his body stand up. The jinshin outside his skin was pierced in an instant. Li Yundong's perfect jade body was immediately broken, and a trace of blood oozed out of his skin. The pupils in Li Yundong's eyes shrank like needles in an instant. He had fought with the mystical silver fox several times, but he had never been approached by the mystical silver fox in an instant. He had never been so close to him without being aware of it. What a powerful magic formation, what a powerful sword. The three ultimate formation really deserved its reputation. Chapter 959. As soon as Li Yundong stepped into the three ultimate formation, he felt the huge power of the formation for the first time. Seeing that the two sharp swords were about to penetrate his body, he immediately flipped his 10 fingers and flicked them firmly on the bodies of the two long swords. Awesome. The strength of Li Yundong's fingers seemed to be light, but in fact, it was like a mountain-splitting axe. With just a light touch, the sword swung away with a clang. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's bodies shook and they were sent flying far away in an instant. Li Yundong said in a deep voice, "Deng Yu, Deng Jiao, don't you recognize me at all?" Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were shaken away by Li Yundong, and the qi and blood in their chests were rolling. When Deng Jiao heard Li Yundong's words, she immediately relaxed a little. Her eyes were a little confused in an instant, and she no longer looked cold and murderous. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, who were standing to one side, were sisters. The two of them were connected. The elder sister's mind was shaken, and the younger sister's reaction was naturally a little slow. Li Yundong's eyes were sharp, and he immediately noticed Deng Jiao's abnormality. He was also keenly aware that the attack in the magic formation did not come immediately. His heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to call out Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's names again, he suddenly saw that Deng Jiao had come to her senses at this time. Her eyes focused again and her two cold eyes were like ice knives. When she stared at him, it was like an ice knife went straight into his body, making him feel cold all over. A long sword suddenly jumped up in front of Li Yundong. The long sword had originally been stuck in the ground, but at this time, it jumped into the air. Next to the long sword, a misty human figure slowly appeared. This person was tall and burly, and he could vaguely recognize that he was a male Taoist priest. He wore a Taoist hat, held a long sword in one hand and pinched his fingers with the other. His clothes fluttered like a sword immortal, and he rushed straight toward Li Yundong. At this time, Li Yundong was in this stone cave. The corridor was narrow and it was difficult to hide. Although there were bursts of fluorescence in front of him, the fluorescence was actually not conspicuous. He could only vaguely see the shape of a long sword. Further in was deep and thick darkness, and only by moving forward could he see it clearly. Li Yundong knew that he couldn't hide, so he made a big hand seal and slapped at the sword immortal. Even the other 4 wisdom kings had to retreat from his palm, not daring to face it head-on. However, after the sword immortal was hit by this palm, his whole body dissipated, and the long sword was shaken away. But soon, it gathered again not far away, turned into a sword immortal, and went straight to Li Yunyang. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the triple ultimate array was relying on the rich spiritual qi that Mount Longhu had accumulated over thousands of years to support the sword immortal's primordial spirit, preventing it from being destroyed. In the middle of the Eastern Han dynasty, Zhang Daoling had been refining pills in Mount Longhu. After that, almost all the ancestors of Jingyi school had cultivated here. The strength of the spiritual qi accumulated over thousands of years was really unimaginable, especially the rich spiritual qi, which was almost endless, inexhaustible and inexhaustible. The reason why golden immortals were powerful was that they had understood the truth of heaven and earth. Everything in the world was just a variety of energy in their eyes. They could use the power of their own universe to resonate with the universe, thereby borrowing the power of heaven and earth for their own use. Therefore, every move they made had earth-shattering power. But the reason why the triple ultimate array was so powerful was that as soon as anyone entered the array, they would immediately be cut off from the outside world. Cultivators could no longer borrow the power of the universe. Even their own universe could resonate with the universe and reach the realm of the unity of heaven and man. When Li Yundong first entered the array, he felt that it was dark in front of him, as if he had entered another world. At first he didn't feel anything unusual, but when he repelled 2 attacks and took a deep breath, he immediately noticed that something was wrong. Li Yundong only felt that although his Naiden was supplying a large amount of jinqi and spiritual power, when he breathed, He did not absorb any of the spiritual energy between heaven and earth. At his level of cultivation, every breath he took was a form of cultivation, and he could absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Only in this way could his magic power and true essence grow and multiply endlessly. But just now he did not feel any spiritual chi gathering in his body. This meant that he could only rely on his own magic power and true essence to fight against the powerful arrays in the three ultimate great array. The power of the array came from heaven and earth. Although Li Yundong was a golden immortal, if he only used his own strength to fight, his strength would be exhausted. No matter how powerful a person was, how could he compete with the vast and majestic power of heaven and earth? Li Yundong's face changed. In an instant, another wave of attacks rushed toward him. Every time he took a step, a long sword would jump up beside him, and a sword immortal holding a long sword would appear. Each of these sword immortals had the strength of a golden immortal, and they were extremely fierce in the array. The edge of the long sword emitted a strange light. As long as it touched Li Yundong's body protecting Jinshin, it could immediately penetrate him. Li Yundong gritted his teeth and struck out again. This time, the spiritual power and jinchi of his palm were so thick and condensed that it seemed to be solid. It was like a golden palm of flesh slapping in front of him. Several sharp swords in front of him stabbed at him, and he could even see the dents and traces of the swords piercing straight into Li Yundong's palm. Li Yundong saw that after the big handprint was split by the two sword immortals from the left and right, it did not stop moving. It split into two sides and chopped down toward his shoulders. His body didn't move, and in an instant 2 arms appeared on his shoulders. It was the incarnation of the Jinshin Yang spirit, and it blasted toward the 2 golden immortals. Although the cauldron of the human body could produce a temporary change through the internal organs and the circulation of blood and qi, it could not be like the golden body of Yang spirit, which could be ever-changing, long or short. Li Yundong's 2 arms seemed to be the same as ordinary arms, but the moment they were thrown out, they suddenly increased in size. They hit the bodies of the 2 sword immortals on the left and right, and in an instant they were blown into countless pieces. But as soon as they were smashed, the figures of the 2 sword immortals gathered together in an instant. Li Yundong took a step forward with the bombardment, and then another sword jumped out with a clang. In an instant, another sword immortal appeared with a long sword in his hand. Li Yundong took a deep breath and thought to himself, the deeper I go into this magic formation, the greater the pressure and the greater the power. If I turn around and run out at this time, I wonder if I can escape? As soon as this thought came to his mind, Li Yundong was shocked. He suddenly realized that the most terrible thing about the Sanju formation was not only that it could block the top masters from sensing and merging with heaven and earth, but also that it could put a strong psychological pressure on the people who entered the formation. As long as the people who entered the formation had the idea of escaping and put it into practice, it was equivalent to destroying their Taoist heart, and the Sanju formation would instantly kill Li Yundong. For a cultivator, there was nothing more terrible than the destruction of their Taoist heart. Li Yundong forcibly suppressed this idea. He took a deep breath with a hiss, which was long and full, as if he wanted to suck out all the air in the cave in one breath. He shouted, stamped his feet, and rushed into the depths of the cave like a cannonball. Since he couldn't retreat, he might as well go forward. As soon as Li Yundong moved, countless precious swords that had been used by the ancestors of the Jingyi school jumped out of the cave. They shone in the air of the cave, like a bright galaxy of sword rain. When Ziyuan broke through the formation, there was no Deng Yu and Deng Jiao presiding over it. Just the automatic attack of the divine sword in the formation had almost killed her. At this time, with the 2 powerful sword souls, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, presiding over it, the power of the formation had multiplied by a terrifying amount. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao stood in the river formed by the long swords. Their movements, thoughts and eyes were almost the same. At this time they no longer needed to take the initiative to attack Li Yundong, because they were the masters of the formation. The power of the formation would be based on the 2 of them to instigate the attack. Li Yundong took a step forward more than 10 meters. Just as he was about to take another step forward, he saw a sudden flash of silver light in front of him, and countless precious swords rushed toward him. These swords were densely packed like a torrent of mountain torrents and also like a steel meat grinder. Anything that touched its edge would be instantly crushed into powder. Li Yundong's shoulders and his own 2 arms quickly pinched the immovable Wisdom King's fundamental seal, and with an extremely astonishing speed, instantly shot out countless large handprints in front of him, as if erecting a glittering golden Buddha wall. As soon as these swords collided with the Buddha wall, there was a dull sound and the stone cave buzzed. These countless swords were like soldiers charging into the formation, suddenly hitting the hard city gate of the city. They rushed forward one after another, squeezing each other. The long swords in front were even bent and made a creaking sound, which made people's hair stand on end. At this time, Li Yundong's hair stood on end, and the blood in his body was boiling. The bones in his body kept making cracking sounds, as if the sky had collapsed and he was holding up the sky with one arm. This force was really too strong. Although Li Yundong could block it for a while because the power of his unity of heaven and man was blocked by the magic formation, he could only rely on the power of his own universe to compete with the strong magic formation. However, the power of the magic formation came from heaven and earth. The three ultimate formations in the world and the immortal killing formation were the most terrifying top-level magic formations. Whether it was the old ancestors of the three pure ones or Buddha Tathagata, they didn't dare to enter the formation alone. Only when several top experts joined forces and used the power of top-level treasures did they dare to enter the formation. Li Yundong broke into the array alone. He really didn't know what to do. His feet were pressed into the hard rock ground by the terrifying force of the magic array. It was as if there was a quagmire under his feet, and his body was pushed to the ground, leaving a gully. Li Yundong was shocked, and an ominous thought flashed through his mind. But he soon thought of something and shouted at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao again, "Deng Yu, Deng Jiao. It doesn't matter if you don't remember me. Do you still remember young Master He?" As soon as Li Yundong shouted, Deng Yu's body trembled violently. The sword formation in front of Li Yundong, which was like a wild dragon, disappeared without a trace in an instant. Chapter 960. As the sword soul in the Sanju magic formation, Deng Jiao's every move, thought would affect the power and function of the magic formation. When she was called by Li Yundong, she was so shocked that countless memories appeared in her mind in an instant. Please remember me. These images included the scene when she had just met Li Yundong at school, the nightmarish memory of meeting young Master He in the hotel, and some extremely hazy memories of being reborn in the lotus pond hidden deep in her mind. In the previous magic formation, Deng Jiao had not been completely covered by the divine senses and thoughts of the immortals invited by the God-inviting spell. It was like a big dam that looked strong and majestic, but in fact, it was empty and had many loopholes. This was the principle of a dam of 1,000 miles being destroyed by an ant's nest. Deng Jiao had a very deep impression of Li Yundong, and it could even be said that he was one of the people who had left the deepest impression on her in the world. At the same time, Li Yundong shouted young Master He's name, and young Master He was also one of the people who had left the deepest impression on her in this world. When the two of them combined, they immediately broke through the big dam full of loopholes. Deng Jiao's eyes were confused and she had a splitting headache. She couldn't help but cover her head and moan in pain. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were both twin sisters, so they naturally felt the same as their elder sister. Their minds and divine senses were also greatly affected, and they also covered their heads in pain. The Sanju magic formation was suddenly paralyzed, and all the sword immortals disappeared in an instant. The long swords that had been floating in the air like the Milky Way also floated in the air again. All the pressure around Li Yundong suddenly disappeared. He found that although Deng Yu and Deng Jiao had similar reactions, the elder sister, Deng Jiao, was the most intense. He immediately continued and shouted at Deng Jiao, "Deng Jiao, don't you want to take revenge on young Master He? He once caused you to fall from a building and die. Don't you want him to get what he deserves?" This sentence touched the deepest pain in Deng Jiao's heart. The reason why she was willing to stay in Mount Longhu to continue cultivating was that, on the one hand, she felt that she had been reborn by Zhang Ling, Zhou Ping, and the others and wanted to find an opportunity to repay their kindness. On the other hand, she felt that she had died once and was destined to be with the Jingyi school. At a young age, she had a mind that could see through the world of mortals and was willing to cultivate here. At the same time, her hatred and fear for young Master He were deeply buried in her heart. This kind of fear originated from the fear of power among grassroots girls, and it also originated from the deep-rooted ideology of officials in China. The so-called people should not fight with officials. Although Deng Jiao was usually quiet and introverted, while her sister was lively and extroverted, in reality, the one who really made the decision was her sister, Deng Jiao. She knew very well that if young Master He knew that the two of them were not dead, he would definitely think of a way to silence them. He might even harm his family. Therefore, she had never thought of going down the mountain to look for her parents, nor did she think of a way to contact her friends. She just waited quietly on the mountain with her sister, endured, cultivated silently, and accumulated their own strength. Especially when the two of them heard that Li Yundong, their former good friend and classmate, had also become the most famous cultivator in the cultivation world, the confidence and will in the depths of their hearts became much firmer. Deng Jiao didn't know that young master he had been smashed into powder by Li Yundong. At first she subconsciously muttered to herself, young master he, young master he. But the more she muttered, the brighter her eyes became, and the more intense the hatred in them became. In the end, Deng Jiao's delicate and pretty face became murderous. She asked sternly, young master he? Where is young master he? I want him to die. Seeing that Deng Jiao had already remembered many things, Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He said softly, Deng Jiao, young master he is dead. Do you still remember who I am? He, young master he is, dead? When Deng Jiao suddenly heard the news, it was as if she had gathered all her strength but didn't know where to put it. Her eyes were suddenly filled with confusion as she looked at Li Yundong in confusion. But soon her eyes focused again, and her face showed a trace of surprise and timidity. You are Li Yundong? Li Yundong couldn't help laughing and said, thank God you finally know me. At this time, Deng Jiao had completely recovered from the control of the God-inviting technique. She looked at Li Yundong in surprise and joy. Just as she was about to speak, a figure suddenly flashed beside her. It was her sister struggling and pouncing on Li Yundong with a fierce roar. The surrounding swords once again became covetous, and the tips of the swords pointed at Li Yundong, eager to have a try. Deng Jiao was shocked and quickly shouted, sister, he is Li Yundong. Don't you know him? Deng Yu's divine sense soul had not been completely dispersed. Her mind had only been seriously affected by her sister, Deng Jiao, so her thinking speed and physical speed had greatly decreased. However, after all, there was still a complete divine sense soul of the Jingyi school in her body. Although it was shaken, it had not been completely dispersed. Therefore Deng Yu still had a strong hostility. When she heard Deng Jiao's cry, her divine sense soul in her body subconsciously woke up in an instant. Her eyes were confused and she stayed where she was, but soon her eyes became like lightning. She stared at Deng Jiao and shouted harshly. Her voice was old in vicissitudes. It was clearly the voice of an old woman. As a disciple of the Jingyi school, you actually want to cooperate with outsiders and help them? Don't you feel ashamed of your grandmaster and your master? These words were harsh, making Deng Jiao feel suffocated and ashamed. She subconsciously lowered her head. When Li Yundong saw this, he immediately understood that it was absolutely impossible for him to break the Sanju formation with his own strength. In the past, the three top masters, Ancestor Bodhi, Taishang Laojun and Heavenly Primogenitor, had worked together with many powerful magical weapons to break the Immortal Slaying formation. Today, the power of the Sanju formation was definitely no less than that of the Immortal Slaying formation. It was also a magic formation that the Jingyi school had painstakingly built for many years. Although Li Yundong was the reincarnated Wisdom King, it was simply impossible for him to break the formation alone. If he wanted to break the formation today, it would definitely be a matter of kung fu beyond poetry. Therefore Li Yundong immediately said to Deng Jiao, don't you want to know how young master he died? What happened to you and your sister Deng Yu after you fell from the hotel and your souls were destroyed? Li Yundong's voice was calm and soft, like warm water, making the fear and shame in Deng Jiao's heart gradually disappear. She raised her head and asked curiously, Li Yundong, do you know? After saying this, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She let out a cry and asked, could it be that you killed young master he? Li Yundong looked at Deng Jiao with emotion and slowly told her what had happened that day. When he said that he had seen Deng Yu and Deng Jiao being forced to fall from a building and die one after another by young master he had been so angry that he had chased after the car with his legs. Deng Jiao's eyes suddenly flashed, and she looked at Li Yundong gratefully and emotionally. Even Deng Yu, who had wanted to attack Li Yundong before, stopped at this time. There was some struggle on her face and her eyes were sometimes cold and sometimes confused. But when Li Yundong said that he had caught up with young master he, disregarding the might of the thunder punishment, and killed young master he in a rage, not only did Deng Jiao let out a cry of surprise and cover her mouth with her hand, even Deng Yu was suddenly moved. As if she had gotten to know Li Yundong again, she looked at him up and down seriously. Li Yundong talked all the way. He was very eloquent, and when he talked about his own things, it really made people feel like they were there and empathize. He talked about the separation between him and Su Chan and Ziyuan's selfless sacrifice for him. Finally, when he talked about how Ziyuan had resolutely decided to come to Mount Longhu to steal the sun and moon flowing elixir in order to help him and Su Chan, Li Yundong let out a long sigh. He couldn't help putting his palms together and saying, Deng Jiao, no matter whether you still think of me as a friend or not, or whether you still think of us as classmates, I just want to ask you to open the net and show mercy to Ziyuan. If I can't save her today, from now on, no one will be able to save her. Li Yundong said emotionally, Ziyuan is the most reasonable, understanding, kind and perfect woman I have ever met. She would rather hurt herself than hurt others. Do you have the heart to see such a good woman like her buried in such a living grave for the rest of her life? Buddha said, compassion is the most important thing. Tao ancestor said, all things have feelings. Although we cultivators pay attention to getting rid of the 5 emotions and jumping out of the cage, we are all flesh and blood after all. As long as we are not plants, birds and beasts who can really have no feelings at all. I, Li Yundong, have never begged anyone since I was a child, even if I was down and out, unknown and humble. But today, I beg you, let Ziyuan go and give her a way out. If there is any danger, let me bear it alone. As Deng Jiao listened, her eyes were filled with tears. She subconsciously turned her head to look at her sister, only to see that the hostility in her sister's eyes had long disappeared without a trace. Her divine sense had completely recovered. At this time, tears were streaming down her face. She kept wiping away her tears and sobbing softly. The long swords that were originally floating around her had fallen to the ground at this time, and the terrifying power of the Triple Ju formation had disappeared without a trace. Deng Jiao also wiped away her tears. She forced a smile and said, Li Yundong, I know. Go and save Ziyuan and take her away. Li Yundong looked at Deng Yu, but Deng Yu wiped away her tears, turned her head and said in a choked voice, Go quickly. My face is all ruined from crying. Li Yundong, you are so annoying. Li Yundong smiled and looked into the depths of the magic circle. He saw that without the cover of the long river of sword rain, Ziyuan's figure was faintly visible in the depths of the cave. Li Yundong moved and immediately flashed to Ziyuan's side. He saw that Ziyuan's eyes were closed tightly, and she was still in the final posture. It was as if her whole body had been sealed in meditation, and she was motionless. Li Yundong didn't dare to stay in this terrifying magic formation any longer. He carried Ziyuan on his back and rushed out of the cave. Only when he passed by Deng Yu and Deng Jiao did he stop and say to them, Why don't you go together? Otherwise, won't you be punished according to the rules of the sect if you stay? Deng Yu was delighted. Just as she was about to speak, Deng Jiao shook her head slightly and said softly, No, I will bear the consequences of my own actions. What's more, Master is very good to us. She won't do anything to us. Li Yundong, you'd better go quickly in case something bad happens. Li Yundong was indeed a little afraid of staying in the Sanju formation. Although he was invincible in a one-on-one fight, that was outside the magic formation. No one in the world dared to say that he was still invincible in the Sanju formation. Therefore he was also afraid that trouble would suddenly arise. Especially when he saw that Deng Jiao was serious and determined, he felt relieved and said, If you need anything, I will definitely come to help you. Or if you are not in the Jingyi school one day, you can come to me. Okay. Deng Yu looked at her sister, Deng Jiao, eagerly. Deng Jiao smiled slightly and said, Okay, it's a deal. Li Yundong smiled and nodded to the two of them. His figure flashed and he turned into a blue light and flew away with Ziyuan on his back. Alas, I finally returned to Suzhou from Hong Kong and Shenzhen. I'm so tired. Chapter 961. The moment Li Yundong flew out, Zhang Ling, who was outside the cave, flew in almost at the same time and brushed past Li Yundong. She turned her head and stared at Li Yundong's disappearing figure, her whole body trembling slightly. Zhang Ling turned her face and said to Deng Yu and Deng Jiao in a trembling voice, You too, are you crazy? Do you know what you've done? Deng Yu and Deng Jiao looked at each other. There was a trace of fear on Deng Yu's face, but Deng Jiao knelt on the ground with a thud and said softly, Master, I've been wondering why we were resurrected in Mount Longhu after we died. We once asked you and eldest sister Zhou Ping, but every time we asked you about these things, you either didn't explain it in detail or were very unhappy. Now I understand. It must have been Li Yundong and Ziyuan who saved us, right? Since our lives were saved by you, we'll return them to them now. Moreover, it was my idea to let them go, and we have been deeply indebted to Master these days. If there is any punishment today, just take it out on me. At this time, Deng Yu also hurriedly knelt down and said, No, it has nothing to do with you. I made the decision to let them go. Seeing that the two of them had taken the initiative to fight for the blame, Zhang Ling couldn't help but roar angrily, "Bullsh*T, it's all Bullsh*T. Do you know what you've done?" After that, she raised her hand and wanted to slap Deng Yu and Deng Jiao. But as soon as she moved, she suddenly heard a dignified voice buzzing around her. It was clearly Zhang Tianchu's voice. "Shiji." Zhang Ling's figure suddenly stopped. She looked at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao angrily as if she had expected better from them. In the end, she stomped her feet, let out a long sigh and turned to leave, leaving Deng Yu and Deng Jiao kneeling in the stone cave. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao knew that they had made a big mistake, so they didn't dare to get up. They kept kneeling like this, not even daring to raise their heads. After a long time they heard a voice in their ears. It was Zhang Tianchu. "How long are you two going to kneel like this?" Deng Yu and Deng Jiao trembled and immediately raised their heads. The two of them looked at each other and Deng Yu rushed to say, "Sect leader martial uncle, don't blame big sister, this is my—" Before she could finish, she was interrupted by Deng Jiao. Deng Jiao said, "No, sect leader martial uncle, if you want to punish someone, punish me." The two of them fought over the blame, fearing that Celestial Master Zhang would punish them in a fit of rage. Celestial Master Zhang was silent for a while. Suddenly he chuckled and asked, "Do you also know that you were wrong?" Deng Yu was terrified, but Deng Jiao's expression was calm. Both of them whispered at the same time, "We know our wrongs." Celestial Master Zhang asked gently, "What did you do wrong?" The two sisters looked at each other. Deng Yu said in a low voice, "We shouldn't have colluded with outsiders." Deng Jiao said, "We should have failed to live up to the expectations of Shifu and sect leader Shu." Celestial Master Zhang chuckled and said, "Working together from inside and outside? Isn't it a matter of course for you to repay the favor you owe others?" Why did he feel that he was wrong? As for feeling that you have failed to live up to our expectations, that's not necessary. If you are cultivating for us, you can go down the mountain today. I believe that your Shifu will let you go. At first, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were a little surprised. They thought to themselves, sect leader Shu is not angry with us? But when they heard what he said, the two of them bent down in fear and whispered, "Sect leader Shu, please calm down. We know we were wrong. Don't drive us away." Celestial Master Zhang said slowly, "Do you two know what cultivation is?" Deng Yu and Deng Jiao looked at each other again. They had only cultivated for a short time, and Zhang Ling was a busy person. She was responsible for the daily chores of the Jingyi school. Sometimes when she was busy she would hit the back of the head with her heels. She didn't even have much time to cultivate. Her cultivation stopped at the top of the Yang spirit, and her disciple was only at the Yang spirit level. In terms of cultivation in the Jingyi school, she was really not the best at all. Therefore, how could a person like Zhang Ling have the time and energy to teach them to cultivate? Even a reincarnated wisdom king like Li Yundong, who had great determination, great wisdom and great understanding, was thanks to Zi Yuan, who was both a teacher and a friend, constantly guiding him on the road ahead. In addition, his own personal opportunities and miraculous luck had allowed him to become the invincible Li in the future. Although Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's luck was extraordinary, it was much worse than the two transformations of the Renyuan Jindan and the Diyuan Jindan. Especially on the road of cultivation, if there was no master to personally take care of them, it was absolutely impossible for them to have great cultivation and understand the true meaning of cultivation. Therefore, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao panicked and said timidly, "Sect leader Shu, please give us some advice." Celestial Master Zhang said, "The so-called cultivation is to get rid of the false and retain the true. You two got rid of the false thoughts in your hearts, kept the true thoughts and did good deeds. This is a matter of great merit. How can I be angry?" Deng Yu was overjoyed when she heard this. She jumped up and looked in the direction of the voice. "Sect leader Shu, are you really not angry with us?" Deng Jiao, who was standing to one side, quickly pulled her hand and asked her to kneel down again. However, Deng Yu bowed her head and winked at her with a cheeky smile on her face. Deng Yu was not happy for long before she heard Celestial Master Zhang say, "There's no need to be angry, but the country has its laws and the sect has its dogma. Punishment is inevitable." Deng Yu's face immediately fell. With a drooping face, she knelt on the ground with a thud. She looked at her sister, Deng Jiao, and said in a low voice, "Then sect leader Shu, please punish us." Celestial Master Zhang chuckled and said, "Based on the crimes you two have committed, you should be confined for at least 10 years. But now there is an uninvited guest next to the Fengqian stone on the side peak of the Linggong sect. It's not convenient for me to see her, but she is holding a powerful magical weapon that should have belonged to our genie school. You two go there and bring this powerful magical weapon back to me and I won't punish you." Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were overjoyed at the same time and asked in unison, "Who is it? What powerful magical weapon?" Celestial Master Zhang didn't answer but asked, "Don't you want to know if the two of you can beat her?" Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were young and naive. When they heard this, they suddenly stopped and looked at each other awkwardly. Deng Yu said in a low voice, "Sect leader Shi Shu, since you want us to deal with her, I think both of us should be able to deal with her, right? You won't let us die, will you?" In the end, the little girl played a petty trick and used words to provoke the leader of the genie school. This kind of little girl's thoughts immediately made Celestial Master Zhang smile. "Don't worry, this trip will be more daunting than dangerous. Although according to seniority she should be your senior and her cultivation is far higher than yours, there will be someone to help you. But remember, you must bring that powerful magical weapon back. If this powerful magical weapon falls into the hands of someone with evil intentions, there will be endless troubles in the future." Deng Yu and Deng Jiao listened to Celestial Master Zhang's casual words at first, but his last two sentences were extremely serious. They couldn't help but look serious and said in unison, "Sect leader Shi Shu, don't worry. We'll go now. Sect leader Shi Shu, please tell us what this powerful magical weapon is like. What's its name?" Celestial Master Zhang was silent for a while, then said word by word, "This powerful magical weapon is called the Glass Mirror of Heaven." While Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were fighting with Li Yundong in the cave on the other side on the tourist bus of Tianan University, the students of Tianan University were chatting and laughing. The past few days of travel had left a deep impression on them. Although Mount Longhu was not a particularly fun place for them, and many of them had even been to many foreign tourist attractions, it was the first time that thousands of people had gone on such a wild trip outside. Many people even became lovers because of this opportunity. Therefore, almost all the students of Tianan University were very excited during this trip. They whispered to each other, talked and laughed. But there were also some exceptions, such as Sun Li of the Student Union. At this time she was collapsed in her seat on the bus, her whole body looking like it was about to collapse. Li Yundong had launched this event with great heroism, and the people around him admired him for spending a lot of money on it. But although he was only the initiator of the idea, almost all of the specific matters had fallen on the Student Union of Tianan University. As one of the most favored successors of the Student Council, Sun Li was naturally the one with the heaviest workload. Unlike Zhou Qin, who was a cultivator with an incomparably strong physical body and spirit, she was just a mortal made of flesh and blood. For the past few days she had not been able to rest a single day. Countless tasks had been assigned to her, and she was so busy that she was overloaded. Only now did she finally heave a sigh of relief. But just as she was resting, her phone suddenly rang again. Sun Li glanced at the phone and saw that it was a call from one of her best friends in the Student Union. She picked up the phone and said weakly, "Hello? If you have something to say, report it. If not, dismiss the court." The voice on the other side of the phone was extremely anxious. "T. You're still in the mood to joke around?" Sun Li sat up immediately. "What happened?" she asked anxiously. The voice on the other side of the phone was almost shouting at the top of her lungs. "Yin Hua is missing." Sun Li's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes widened. When thousands of students were traveling together, the most difficult thing to manage was managing their movements. The slightest mistake could lead to an embarrassing situation where they got lost, especially when there were many students who, on a whim, would form groups of 3 or 5 to explore Mount Longhu on their own. It was rare for them to get lost and disappear. Sun Li had been tormented for a long time. But Sun Li had never imagined that something like this would happen to the current Student Union president. She was both shocked and angry. She couldn't help but raise her voice. "How could this be?" Her voice was sharp and clear. The driver jumped in fright and instinctively slammed on the brakes. The students on the bus were also frightened into silence. All of them turned to look at Sun Li. Sun Li listened to the conversation on the phone for a while. After hanging up, she raised her head and looked left and right. "Stop the car. Stop the car," she yelled in a flustered and exasperated voice. "Someone's been left behind." "Sun Li." "Our car has already stopped," one of her classmates whispered to her in a timid voice. "Then hurry up and drive it back," Sun Li yelled in annoyance. Chapter 962. Li Yundong flew out of the Sanju formation with Ziyuan on his back. Before long, Li Yundong heard a soft whisper coming from behind him. "Put me down. Please remember me." Li Yundong was overjoyed. He turned his head and said, "Ziyuan, are you awake?" Ziyuan's face was a little pale. She leaned her head gently on Li Yundong's shoulder and repeated softly, "Put me down." Although Ziyuan's voice was soft, it revealed a sense of determination. He couldn't help but be stunned. He stopped and said, "Ziyuan, it's mean." Ziyuan said in a low voice, "I know. Li Yundong put me down." Li Yundong respected Ziyuan very much, so he immediately landed. The place under his feet was still the green Mount Longhu. The two of them landed here, surrounded by tall pines, rugged rocks, and green grass under the stone trees. It was full of spring. There was a stream flowing down where they landed. Li Yundong carefully placed Ziyuan beside a rock and said to her, "What's wrong with you? Are you okay?" Ziyuan raised her eyes and looked at Li Yundong. Her lips moved slightly as if she wanted to say something, but she quickly swallowed it back. Although she didn't know what had happened before, she was an extremely smart person. She could guess what was going on. She sighed in her heart and whispered softly, "Master, you were right again. Your psalms are all right. He really came back to life. All my efforts were not in vain. But what do you mean by the last round?" Ziyuan sat quietly on a low stone. She lowered her eyes, and her long eyelashes trembled gently. Her gaze was distant, and she stared at a blade of grass struggling to get out of the crack in the stone. She was lost in thought. She didn't ask how Li Yundong had come back to life, nor did she ask why he had come to save her. She just sat quietly on the stone alone, as quiet as a painting and as elegant as a poem. Li Yundong didn't ask her how she had thought of going to the Sanju Formation to snatch the sun and moon flowing elixir, nor did he ask her why she was sitting here silently and refused to leave. He just quietly accompanied her. The two of them seemed to have a tacit understanding. They silently accompanied each other, and neither of them asked a single question. It seemed that as long as the other was well, that was enough. Everything else became unimportant at this moment. After an unknown period of time, Ziyuan's gaze slowly turned to the trickling stream next to her. She saw two figures reflected in the stream. The man was extraordinarily handsome, and the woman was as beautiful as a fairy. At first glance they really looked like a pair of immortal lovers. Ziyuan sighed softly in her heart. In the end, she raised her eyes and said to Li Yundong, I'm a little thirsty." Seeing that she had finally spoken, Li Yundong couldn't help but feel relieved. He smiled and said, "Wait a minute, I'll go get some water for you." He quickly walked to the stream. Just as he was about to bend down, he suddenly felt a slight wind coming from behind him. Li Yundong turned his head and saw that Ziyuan had disappeared. Only the green grass beside the stone was still swaying gently. Li Yundong was shocked. He immediately turned his Jinshinyang spirit into countless doppelgangers and scattered them in all directions. In an instant he sensed Ziyuan's whereabouts. He moved and caught up with her. He caught up with Ziyuan, grabbed her hand and said loudly, "Ziyuan, where are you going?" Seeing that she couldn't escape, Ziyuan struggled hard and said, "Let go." Li Yundong held her tightly and pulled her to the ground. His cultivation was far higher than Ziyuan's. With this pull, Ziyuan, a master of thunder retribution, had no choice but to follow him to the ground. She turned her head, her eyes full of tears, and said, "Li Yundong, who are you to me? What does it have to do with you where I go?" Li Yundong was shocked when he heard this, and he couldn't help but loosen his grip on Ziyuan's hand. However, he felt that the moment Ziyuan withdrew her hand, he held it tightly again. Li Yundong said slowly and seriously, "Ziyuan, in my heart you are my teacher, my friend and my confidant. You know, I don't want you to leave." Ziyuan's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong, and she unconsciously became infatuated. After a long time, she lowered her eyes, and a tear fell involuntarily from the corner of her eye. She said softly, "Is it my teacher's, friend and confidant? Is there nothing else?" As soon as Ziyuan finished speaking, her heart began to beat wildly. Even she could not believe that she had actually said such a thing. After she finished speaking, she regretted it. A layer of beautiful red spread across her neck at an astonishing degree. It was so charming and moving that it was intoxicating. Li Yundong's heart was also pounding when he heard this. For a moment, even with his cultivation, he couldn't help but feel thirsty. He was at a loss and didn't know what to say. At this time, Ziyuan was afraid and panicked. She was afraid that Li Yundong would say something. If he said something she didn't want to hear, what should she do? But deep in her heart, she was worried about another problem that she was even more afraid of. If he didn't say what she wanted to hear, what should she do? The goddess Banxian, who was usually wise and calm, was panicking at this time. She wanted to escape immediately, but her feet seemed to have taken root and she stood firmly in place. Just like that, one of them lowered his eyes and scanned the ground with a fearful gaze, like a frightened deer waiting for something. The other's gaze was conflicted and confused. He stood there in a daze, not moving, not saying a word. After an unknown period of time, Ziyuan saw that he still did not say anything that made her feel uneasy, nor did he say the words that she had faintly hoped for in the depths of her heart. She couldn't help but sigh silently in her heart and slowly raise her head. However, she had regained her usual calm face. Ziyuan said softly, "Li Yundong, let go." Li Yundong was very anxious and suddenly said in a very rude and overbearing manner, "No, you can't go." Ziyuan stared at Li Yundong and smiled sadly. Her lips moved, wanting to say something heartless, but when the words were on the tip of her tongue, she couldn't say them. She knew that as long as she said these words, Li Yundong would not let her stay, and it would be possible for her to completely let go of this relationship. However, Ziyuan asked herself. Ever since she had been led down the mountain by Ruan Hongling and entered the secular world to cultivate, she had met Li Yundong. After getting along with him for so many days, the two of them had gone through fire and water and saved each other countless times. Although this kind of relationship was not as vigorous as that between Li Yundong and Su Chan, it was also lingering. How could she let it go so easily? Ziyuan's heart was full of worries. She had thought that she had seen through everything in the Sanju formation and let go of everything, but when she saw Li Yundong again and the enthusiasm and joy hidden in his eyes, her calm heart began to stir again. Ziyuan stared at Li Yundong. After a long time, she sighed slowly and said, "Li Yundong, I want to see the Fengchen stone that Master left for me. Is that okay?" Seeing that she didn't mention leaving again, Li Yundong was relieved. He let go of her hand, smiled and said, "Okay, I'll go with you." Ziyuan shook her head gently, sighed in a low voice and walked up the mountain. When Li Yundong saw her going up the mountain, he was stunned. He looked around and found that the place where they were staying was the side peak where the Lingong sect was located. Li Yundong followed slowly behind Ziyuan, talking to her from time to time along the way. He wanted to make her happy, but Ziyuan was so worried that she couldn't laugh. Li Yundong talked for a while, but seeing that Ziyuan still ignored him, he sighed and didn't say anything more. The two of them walked slowly along the mountain road. Before they reached the top of the mountain, they heard a cry. Ziyuan stopped and Li Yundong rushed to her side and whispered, "Who is it?" Ziyuan frowned and said in a low voice, "I don't know. It seems to be coming from the Fengchen stone." The two of them looked at each other and quickly and quietly walked a few steps forward. They hid in the forest and quietly looked outside. They were immediately shocked to see Yan Hua beside the wind dust stone, holding it and crying bitterly. Li Yundong and Ziyuan looked at each other and were tongue-tied. Countless questions appeared in their minds. Why is Yan Hua here? Why is he crying here? While they were stunned, they heard Yan Hua crying, "Shixiang, you are so heartless. You abandoned me and lied to me for 10 years for that **T*. 10 years, Shixiang. How many decades can a person live for? Do you know what I did when I thought you were dead? 10 years ago, everyone in the world said that you, Wang Yuanshan, were lustful and betrayed your sect. In order to give you an ordinary life, I abandoned my identity and body and turned into a fox demon that I hated the most. I lurked in the Fox Zen school, just wanting to avenge you and prove your innocence. But in the end I found out that you didn't die. You faked your death for that **T*. Since you didn't die, why didn't you tell me? I've done so much for you. Why are you so heartless to me? You can die for her, but you won't say a few more words to me for me? Shixiang, you are really the most heartless man in the world." Yan Hua cried loudly, his tears pouring down like rain. His voice was high and shrill, and it did not sound like a man's voice at all. However, if it was a woman's voice, it would be coarse and it would make one's hair stand on end. Ziyuan and Li Yundong felt their hair stand on end when they heard his voice. They looked at each other with fear in their eyes and saw the horror in the depths of each other's hearts. Impossible. This is Yan Fong. Chapter 963. Li Yundong and Ziyuan were two extremely smart people, but they had never expected that Yan Fong would become a person who was neither a man nor a woman. Their cultivation was high and their eyes were sharp so they could see the general trend. But when they heard Yan Fong say such words in Yan Hua's body, their minds raced like lightning, and they immediately understood all the key points. "Please remember me." The two of them stared at each other, and Ziyuan's expression was extremely strange. Although she had never had any deep feelings for Yen Fong, her Shu, she was still a member of the same sect in her master's shimmy. She was also a close person who had watched her grow up. With these layers of relationships, it was difficult for her to be hostile to Yen Fong. Although Li Yundong had been enemies with Yen Fong several times, he felt that although Yen Fong's cultivation was not high, she was scheming and tenacious. She could hide in the dark for many years without doing anything. With such an enemy hiding in the dark to deal with her, it was really a little uneasy. As the saying goes, one can only be a thief for 1,000 days, but not guard against thieves for 1,000 days. When Li Yundong saw Yen Fong escape last time, he had an idea. At this time, when he saw Yen Fong appear again, she had turned into a man. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Among the female cultivators in the world, no one can compare to Yen Fong in terms of ruthlessness and forbearance. This woman is really terrifying. Fortunately, she is still one step away from the Jinshin. Otherwise, once she breaks through the Jinshin, it will be very annoying if she hides in the dark and makes things difficult for me. However, Ziyuan looked at Yen Fong, who was neither a man nor a woman, holding a stone and crying bitterly about Wang Yuanshan's death. She felt sad and sighed in her heart. She immediately sent a voice transmission to Li Yundong and said, "Li Yundong, Yen Fong has become neither a man nor a woman, and she has no relatives. Please be magnanimous and let her go." Li Yundong sighed and wrote on the ground saying, "Look at Yen Fong. Although she is now occupying the body of a man, in fact her 6 senses have been removed. Her voice is feminine, and there is a trace of yin qi between her eyebrows. Obviously she has lost her power and no longer has a yang root. Why do you think she's so cruel to herself?" Ziyuan suddenly stopped talking. She knew that the most terrible thing about a person was not her cruelty to her enemies, but her cruelty to herself. A person who could be so cruel to herself, what would she do to her enemies? Just thinking about it was enough to make one shudder. Ziyuan sighed and shook her head secretly. Her brows were full of worry. Seeing her in such a dilemma, Li Yundong's heart couldn't help but soften. He wrote on the ground again, "Well, for your sake, I'll let her go again. In the future, as long as her target is me and not the people around me, I'll let her go no matter how many times she comes, okay?" Ziyuan's eyes darted around, and she breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She said via voice transmission, "Then I'll thank you on behalf of the Linggong sect. You've left some incense for our Linggong sect." Li Yundong wrote curiously and asked, "What do you mean? Aren't you the head of the Linggong sect?" Ziyuan said via voice transmission, "I stole the sun and moon elixir, and you saved me from the Sanju formation. The Jingyi school will definitely not swallow this. But they won't come to make trouble for you because they definitely don't want to make another strong enemy like you now. But it's not necessarily the case for me. They won't take me back, but they will definitely expel me from the Jingyi school and exempt me from inheriting the position of the head of the Linggong sect." As Ziyuan spoke, her voice gradually became a little low and disappointed. Li Yundong sighed in his heart and wrote, "This is all because you wanted to save me. Don't worry, I will definitely seek justice for you." Ziyuan shook her head and was about to speak when she suddenly heard Yen Fong, who was holding the stone and crying bitterly, suddenly stand up. She glared at Ao Wushuang, who had turned into a rock not far from the Fengqian stone, and said sternly, "It's all your fault, B****. When you were alive you implicated my Shixiang. Now that you're dead you won't let him go? You still have the face to stand by his side? Get out of here." Before Yen Fong returned to Mount Longhu, she had thought that Li Yundong had brought the students of Tianan University to Mount Longhu just to throw a tantrum and play around, but she had never expected that there were so many secrets hidden behind it. She had been concentrating on cultivation these days and knew very little about the cultivation world, so she was a bit like a peach garden. If you don't know the Qin and Han dynasties, how can you talk about the Wei and Jin dynasties? If she hadn't inadvertently overheard the disciples of the Jingyi school chatting in private when they were bored, she wouldn't have known that so many things had happened. She wouldn't have known that Wang Yuanshan had died for Ao Wushuang, and that Ao Wushuang had also followed him in front of the Fengqian stone. Yen Fong really hated Ao Wushuang to the bone. This fox demon had stolen her Shixiang, who had been her childhood sweetheart, when she was alive. After she died she still refused to let him go? The more Yen Fong looked at the stone that Ao Wushuang had turned into, the redder her eyes became. Her anger rose from her heart and she became bold. With a sharp roar, she rushed toward the stone that Ao Wushuang had turned into. Ziyuan and Li Yundong, who were in the bushes, were shocked. Just as they were about to rush out, they suddenly saw 2 figures flash. It was Deng Yu and Deng Jiao who had arrived hand in hand. As soon as Deng Yu and Deng Jiao landed on the ground, they saw a man with red eyes crying and rushing toward the stone that Ao Wushuang had turned into. They knew the origin of this stone. The sisters were not serious inner disciples, so they didn't have the sense of superiority of the disciples of famous sections. They thought that they were the only righteous ones in the world, and the others were all insignificant pawns, let alone a mere fox demon. Therefore, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao didn't mind Ao Wushuang's identity as a fox demon. They admired and respected her infatuation. At this time, seeing that Yen Hua wanted to smash the big stone that Ao Wushuang had turned into, they suddenly became furious and shouted in unison, "Stop!" Yen Fang stopped and turned around with red eyes. After looking Deng Yu and Deng Jiao up and down, she said in a cold voice, "Who are you two?" Deng Yu and Deng Jiao looked at each other. Deng Yu snorted and said, "You don't need to know who we are. Let me tell you, my master Zhang Ling once ordered that no one is allowed to damage this stone. Who are you? How dare you be so presumptuous in Mount Longhu?" Yen Fang looked up and laughed. Her laughter was sad. "Who am I? How many people in the world know who I am now? When I reunited with Shi Xiang here, even he didn't recognize me. Little girl, when I was cultivating in Mount Longhu, you weren't even born yet." Deng Yu and Deng Jiao didn't believe what Yen Fang had said. Deng Yu snapped, "Nonsense." Deng Jiao pressed Deng Yu's hand and said in a soft voice, "We don't care who you are, but Shishu leader asked us to come to you to get something back." Yen Fang's voice gradually turned cold. She looked at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao unkindly and asked, "What is it?" Deng Yu rushed to say, "Do you have a very important powerful magical weapon on you? It's called the Mirror of Heaven and Earth?" This sentence shocked Yen Fang so much that her whole body trembled. She looked around in horror and saw that there was no one around. When she looked at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao again, her eyes suddenly became extremely fierce and sharp. She said sternly, "What did you say? What mirror of heaven and earth? Who told you that? Was it Master Zhang? How did he know?" Deng Yu didn't know how terrifying and powerful Yen Fang was. He said carelessly, "It's good that you know. My Shishu leader asked us to find you and get this powerful magical weapon back. This powerful magical weapon should have belonged to our Jingyi school. Now it should be returned to its rightful owner." Yen Fang couldn't help laughing angrily. "Returned to its rightful owner? Good, what a good returning the item to its rightful owner. I really want to see if you two little girls who haven't even grown up yet, dare to fight with me?" As the three of them were talking, Li Yundong and Zi Yuan, who were hiding in the bushes, were really stunned. After a long time, Li Yundong quickly wrote on the ground, "It turns out that the Mirror of Heaven and Earth was stolen by Yen Fang. I was wondering why someone got there before us last time when we went to get the powerful magical weapon according to the location your master had told us." Zi Yuan's heart was in turmoil. She said via voice transmission, "No wonder. It must have been Yen Fang who recognized Master, and then Master told her the location of the treasure. That's why Yen Fang took the Mirror of Heaven and Earth one step ahead of us." Li Yundong wrote curiously and asked, "But I don't understand. Didn't you say that the Mirror of Heaven and Earth is the best cultivation magical weapon in the world? Why is Yen Fang still only at the top level of the Yang spirit after taking this powerful magical weapon?" Zi Yuan shook her head and said via voice transmission, "I don't know either. Back then, Master only told me that this powerful magical weapon was a top cultivation magical weapon. He didn't know how to use it or what magical effects it had, let alone me. But I guess it should be because the powerful magical weapon hasn't recognized its master yet. It may be the only powerful magical weapon that needs a special relationship to recognize its master." Li Yundong knew that the so-called only powerful magical weapon referred to the 7 billion people in the world. Only one person could make this powerful magical weapon recognize its master. Unless this person died, it was impossible for anyone else in the world to make this powerful magical weapon recognize its master, let alone awaken the magical power and effects of the powerful magical weapon. This kind of relationship was a bit like the relationship between the living Buddha's inheritance in Tibetan Buddhism. When a living Buddha was about to die, he would often tell his disciples where his next reincarnation spirit child was. His disciples would search for it according to the information provided by the living Buddha. This way it would be passed down from generation to generation, and the incense would never end. Li Yundong felt strange and wrote on the ground, "The conditions for this powerful magical weapon to recognize its master are really a bit harsh." Zi Yuan said via voice transmission, "It's not harsh, but it's indeed very harsh. After all, the probability is 1 in 7 billion. But once it meets its destined master, this powerful magical weapon will recognize its master unconditionally. Moreover, as long as this person is not dead, even if anyone takes away the mirror of heaven and earth, it will be equivalent to holding an ordinary mirror. It will have no magical effect at all. Li Yundong nodded and continued to write on the ground. Then I'll take this powerful magical weapon back and give it to you. This is the real return to its original owner. Ziyuan sighed and said via voice transmission, the characteristic of this powerful magical weapon is that the lower the cultivation of the person, the more valuable and useful it will be. For people like us who have broken through the Jinshin Thunder Retribution phase, the use of this powerful magical weapon is extremely limited. I wanted to take back this powerful magical weapon because I wanted you to use it to break through to a stronger realm. But now that you have achieved success and recognition, this powerful magical weapon is of little significance to you. For me, it's not so important. Li Yundong was about to continue writing on the ground when he saw Yen Feng had already shouted and pounced on Deng Yu and Deng Jiao. His heart skipped a beat and he was about to help when he suddenly heard another voice. It was the voice of a middle-aged man. The voice chuckled and said, "A dignified senior of the Lingong sect is bullying two little girls. Don't you feel ashamed?" Yen Feng shuddered and immediately froze. She looked sharply in the direction of the voice. Li Yundong and Ziyuan also looked in the direction of the voice in surprise, only to see a middle-aged man in a gray Taoist robe slowly walking out. It was Yin Kong who had led his disciples to force Li Sen to join the Shantian sect and coaxed Li Sen to join the Shantian sect. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.